The desert sky burned orange as the sun began to set over Iraq. Operation Desert Storm was in its final days, but the dangers remained as real as ever. Captain Jack Reynolds maneuvered his F-15 Eagle through the hazy atmosphere, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon and his instruments. The year was 1991, and America was flexing its military might against Saddam Hussein's forces. Eagle 2, this is Eagle 1. Maintain formation and prepare for the final sweep. Jack spoke into his oxygen mask, his voice steady despite the tension coursing through his body. Copy that, Eagle 1, came the response from his wingman, Captain Thomas Williams. Their mission was straightforward but critical. Perform one final reconnaissance sweep of a suspected chemical weapons facility before the ground troops moved in at dawn. Intelligence had confirmed the facility was mostly abandoned, but verification was essential. The stakes were too high to rely on satellite imagery alone. Jack checked his fuel gauge. They had enough for the sweep and the return journey with the standard safety margin. Everything was proceeding according to plan until the radio crackled with urgency. Mayday! Mayday! This is Hawk 3, taking heavy fire from unmarked position. Systems failing. The voice belonged to Lieutenant Rodriguez, piloting a reconnaissance aircraft several miles east of Jack's position. Jack's heart rate spiked. Rodriguez wasn't part of their mission package, but he was flying support for a separate operation in the sector. According to the mission briefing, no American aircraft should be in that area tonight. Command, this is Eagle 1. We have a mayday from Hawk 3. Request permission to provide assistance. The response came swiftly. Negative, Eagle 1. Maintain your current mission. We're dispatching rescue from Al Dhafra. Your mission takes priority. Jack's jaw tightened. The chemical weapons facility intelligence was time-sensitive. If they abandoned their sweep, the ground troops might walk into an ambush tomorrow. But Rodriguez was alone under fire and rapidly losing altitude. His position is closer to us than to Al Dhafra, Jack argued, already banking his aircraft slightly toward the distress call. We can reach him in 4 minutes. Eagle 1, this is a direct order. Complete your assigned mission. The ground assault depends on your verification. Time slowed as Jack faced the impossible choice that would haunt him for decades. Follow orders and potentially sacrifice a fellow pilot, or abandon his mission and potentially endanger the lives of dozens of ground troops. Eagle 2, maintain course and complete the sweep, Jack finally ordered his wingman. I'm breaking off to assist Hawk 3. Jack, what are you doing? Williams' voice was tense with concern. What I have to do. Complete the mission, Tom. That's an order. Jack banked his F-15 hard to the east, afterburners engaged, as he raced toward Rodriguez's last known position. His radar soon picked up the signature of the damaged aircraft rapidly losing altitude with 3 enemy MiGs in pursuit. He arrived just as Rodriguez's aircraft was spiraling toward the desert floor. The MiGs scattered as Jack's F-15 roared into the airspace weapon systems locked and ready. He managed to distract them long enough for Rodriguez to make an emergency landing on a stretch of desert hardpan. What Jack didn't know then was that his absence from the reconnaissance mission would have fatal consequences. Without complete verification of the facility's status, the ground commanders proceeded with limited intelligence. The next morning, the assault team encountered unexpected resistance. 3 American soldiers lost their lives clearing rooms that should have been empty. The military investigation that followed was clinical and unforgiving. While Jack had saved Rodriguez's life, his decision to abandon his primary mission had contributed to the deaths of 3 ground troops. No formal charges were filed. Jack had made a judgment call in a complex situation, but the black mark on his record was indelible. The whispers followed him through the ranks, a pilot who couldn't follow orders, who let emotion override duty. 30 years later, the memories still invaded Jack's sleep with merciless clarity. Colonel Jack Reynolds retired bolted upright in his bed, sweat soaking through his t-shirt despite the cool air conditioning of his Virginia home. The nightmare was always the same, the radio calls, the decision, and then the faces of the 3 soldiers who never came home. Men he had never met, but whose fates were inextricably linked to his choice on that desert night. His heart hammered against his ribs as he swung his legs over the side of the bed and checked the time, 0400 hours. Old habits died hard. Even in retirement, he still thought in military time. Jack moved to the window and looked out at the pre-dawn darkness. At 62, his body still maintained much of the discipline of his military years. Though his hair had silvered completely, and deep lines framed his eyes and mouth. Those eyes had seen too much, evaluated too many life-or-death scenarios to ever look young again. On his dresser stood a framed photograph of his old squadron taken just before Desert Storm. Young men with confident smiles, unaware of how the coming conflict would change them. Jack rarely looked at it anymore, but he never put it away. Some burdens were meant to be carried. As the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky, Jack made a decision. He'd been avoiding the invitation for weeks, but perhaps it was time. His daughter's base was conducting joint exercises this week, and as a civilian consultant to military flight programs, he had been invited to observe. He had planned to send his regrets, but now the pull to see her, to see the kind of pilot she had become, overrode his reluctance. Olivia would be surprised. Their relationship had been strained since she announced her intention to become a combat pilot. Jack had opposed her decision from the start, not because she was a woman, but because he knew too well the impossible choices that awaited her in the skies above hostile territory. But perhaps it was time to face his fears, just as his daughter faced hers every time she climbed into a cockpit. The morning sun glinted off the wings of the aircraft lined up on the tarmac at Naval Air Station Pacific Coast. The base hummed with activity as personnel prepared for the day's operations. Among them walked Colonel Jack Reynolds, retired, his military bearing evident despite his civilian clothes. His visitor badge identified him as a consultant, but his reputation preceded him. Junior officers straightened imperceptibly as he passed, recognizing the legendary F-15 pilot, even out of uniform. Jack had arrived unannounced, taking advantage of his consultant credentials to access the base. He wasn't ready to alert Olivia to his presence just yet. First, he wanted to observe her in her element, to see the pilot she had become without his shadow looming over her. "Colonel Reynolds, this is an unexpected pleasure." The voice belonged to Commander Marcus Wright, an officer Jack had met at several military conferences. Jack turned and shook the offered hand. "Just Jack now, Commander. Those days are behind me." Wright smiled knowingly. "Once a colonel, always a colonel, sir. What brings you to our humble base?" "Not that we're not honored to have one of the Air Force's finest visiting the Navy." "I heard you're running some interesting joint exercises this week. Thought I might observe, maybe offer some insights if needed." Wright's eyes narrowed slightly. "And it has nothing to do with Lieutenant Reynolds being one of our pilots." Jack maintained his poker face. "My daughter's assignment to this base is coincidental to my interest in the exercises." "Of course, sir." Wright didn't look convinced. "Well, you're in luck. We're running simulator drills this morning. Your daughter is actually in the middle of a session now. Would you like to observe?" Jack nodded, his expression neutral, despite the sudden tightness in his chest. He followed Wright to the simulator facility, a nondescript building housing state-of-the-art flight simulation technology. Inside the control room, technicians monitored several active simulations. Wright guided Jack to a station where a screen displayed the cockpit view from one of the simulators, along with performance metrics and system status indicators. "That's your daughter's simulation," Wright explained. "She's running a low-altitude penetration scenario through mountainous terrain with active SAM sites and intermittent radar coverage, one of our more challenging programs." Jack watched as the virtual aircraft maneuvered through a narrow valley, maintaining precise altitude control despite simulated turbulence and wind shear. The piloting was exceptional, tight turns executed with the minimal altitude loss, terrain features used effectively to mask the aircraft's radar signature. "She's good," Jack admitted, professional assessment momentarily overriding paternal concerns. "One of our best," Wright confirmed, "especially in low-altitude tactical flying. Her technical knowledge of aircraft systems is outstanding too. Sometimes she spots issues our mechanics miss." The simulation suddenly intensified as multiple missile launch warnings blared. Jack watched as Olivia executed a series of evasive maneuvers, using the terrain to break missile locks while maintaining her course toward the objective. Then something unexpected happened. As a simulated SAM site appeared in a clearing, the aircraft hesitated for a fraction of a second, not enough for most observers to notice, but Jack caught it immediately. That momentary indecision could be fatal in actual combat. The simulation ended with a successful completion of the mission. The performance metrics were exemplary, yet Jack had seen that instant of hesitation, that ghost of doubt. When Olivia emerged from the simulator, she was met with congratulations from her peers, all men, Jack noted. She accepted their praise with modest nods, her focus already on the debriefing notes in her hand. At 32, Olivia Reynolds had her father's sharp blue eyes and determined jaw, but her mother's more delicate features and auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun. She carried herself with the confident precision of a career military officer, her movements economical and purposeful. She hadn't noticed her father yet, giving Jack a moment to observe her interactions with her squadron mates. Most showed genuine respect, though he caught the dismissive glance from one pilot, a tall, broad-shouldered man with captain's bars who seemed to be holding court among a group of junior officers. "That's Captain James Blake," Wright said, following Jack's gaze. "Top gun of the base, or so he likes to remind everyone. Not a big supporter of women in combat roles despite official policy." Jack watched as Blake said something that made his entourage laugh while looking in Olivia's direction. She ignored them completely, her attention fixed on her debriefing notes. "And how does my daughter handle that kind of attitude?" Jack asked. "By outflying him at every opportunity," Wright replied with a small smile. "She doesn't engage in the politics or the posturing, she just performs. Reminds me of someone else I've heard about." Before Jack could respond, Wright called out, "Lieutenant Reynolds, a moment please." Olivia looked up, her professional expression faltering for just an instant when she saw her father standing beside her commanding officer. She quickly recovered, approaching with a perfect military bearing. "Commander Wright, Dad, this is unexpected." Her voice was controlled, but Jack caught the undercurrent of tension. "Lieutenant, your father is here as a consultant to observe our joint exercises." Wright glanced between them, sensing the complexity of their relationship. "I'll leave you two to catch up. Colonel Jack, feel free to use my office if you'd like some privacy." As Wright departed, father and daughter stood in awkward silence, years of unspoken words hanging between them. "Your simulation performance was impressive," Jack finally offered. "Thank you, sir," Olivia replied formally. Then with a hint of defiance, "I didn't know you were coming." It was a last-minute decision. Another silence stretched between them until Olivia sighed. "Look, Dad, I have a briefing in 20 minutes. Why are you really here? Is Mom okay?" "Your mother's fine. She sends her love." Jack paused, searching for the right words. "I'm here because I thought it was time I saw what you've accomplished, without my interference." Skepticism flashed across Olivia's face. "After 3 years of silence on the subject of my career, you've made your opinions quite clear, Dad." Jack studied his daughter's face, recognizing the stubborn determination he'd passed down to her. "People can change their minds, Olivia. Can they? Or are you here to collect more evidence for why I should transfer to transport planes or flight instruction?" The bitterness in her voice was evident. Before Jack could answer, a voice cut across the room. "Well, well, the famous Colonel Reynolds graces us with his presence." Captain Blake approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Come to see how the Navy does things, sir, or just checking up on your little girl?" Jack assessed the man with a cold stare that had made junior officers tremble throughout his career. "Captain Blake, I presume I'm here in a professional capacity as a consultant." Blake had the sense to modulate his tone. "Of course, sir. We're honored to have your expertise. Perhaps you could share some of your Desert Storm experiences with the squadron, always good to learn from." History. The subtle emphasis on the last word, suggesting Jack's experiences were outdated, wasn't lost on either Reynolds. "I'm sure there are lessons from every conflict that remain relevant." "Captain," Jack replied evenly, "including the importance of respecting fellow officers regardless of gender." Blake's smile tightened. "Absolutely, sir. Merit is what matters in combat. If someone can meet the standards without any special accommodations." Olivia remained professionally detached throughout the exchange, but Jack noticed the slight tightening of her jaw. She'd clearly weathered this kind of insinuation before. "My briefing will be starting soon," she said, her voice cool. "If you'll both excuse me." As she walked away, Blake turned to Jack. "She's technically proficient, and I'll give her that. But combat flying requires more than a technical skills. It requires instinct, aggression, decisiveness under extreme pressure. Qualities that are, well, let's just say they're rare in female pilots." Jack leveled a gaze at the younger officer. "I've found, Captain, that real combat reveals what kind of pilot you truly are. Simulators and training exercises can only tell you so much." Exactly my point, sir, Blake replied with false deference. Some of us have actually seen combat. Lieutenant Reynolds hasn't had that opportunity to prove herself yet. That opportunity, as you call it, comes at a high price, Captain. One I hope none of you have to pay. Jack's voice carried the weight of someone who knew that price intimately. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to speak with Commander Wright. As Jack walked away, he couldn't help but wonder if he'd made a mistake coming here. The protective instinct that had driven him to oppose Olivia's career choice surged anew. In his mind, she was still his little girl, who had sat on his lap in the cockpit of a grounded training aircraft, delightedly pushing buttons and pretending to soar through the clouds. But the determined woman he'd just seen was a far cry from that little girl. She had forged her own path despite his objections, despite the Blake types she encountered, despite everything. Perhaps it was time he recognized that fact. While most of the base personnel headed to the main briefing room, Olivia Reynolds made a detour to Hangar 7, a maintenance facility on the far side of the airfield. Unlike the bustling activity of the main hangars, this one housed aircraft undergoing major repairs or modifications, making it relatively quiet during standard operations. She nodded to the guard at the entrance, who recognized her immediately. "Morning, Lieutenant. Chief Rodriguez is expecting you." "Thanks, Simmons." Olivia moved with purpose through the hangar, past partially disassembled aircraft, until she reached a cordoned-off section in the back. Behind the partition stood Chief Petty Officer Michael Rodriguez, a weathered man in his mid-60s whose skilled hands had maintained military aircraft for over 4 decades. His salt and pepper hair was cropped short, and deep creases lined his face from years of squinting in bright flight lines across the world. "Morning, Chief," Olivia called. Rodriguez looked up from the engine component he was examining and smiled warmly. "Lieutenant wasn't expecting you until this afternoon. Plans changed. My father showed up unannounced." Rodriguez's eyebrows rose. "The colonel is here? Well, that's going to make things interesting." Unlike most on the base, Rodriguez knew Jack Reynolds personally. They had served together during Desert Storm, though in very different capacities. The chief had been the mechanic who maintained Jack's F-15 throughout the conflict. "He says he's here as a consultant, but I know he's checking up on me," Olivia said, frustration evident in her voice. Rodriguez wiped his hands on a rag and gestured toward a small office attached to his work area. Once inside with the door closed, the professional formality between them relaxed slightly. "Your father means well, Liv. He's seen things most pilots never have to face." "I know his history, Chief. He's made sure I understand exactly why he thinks why he thinks I shouldn't be in combat roles." Rodriguez shook his head. "That man's objections have nothing to do with you being a woman, no matter what he might say. Jack Reynolds has worked with female pilots who he respected tremendously." "Then why has he fought me on this from day one?" The older man sighed, settling into his worn office chair. "Because he knows what it means to make impossible choices in the air, the kind that haunt you for the rest of your life." Olivia leaned against the wall, crossing her arms. "Is this about what happened in Iraq? He never talks about it, not really." "Not my story to tell." Rodriguez picked up a file folder from his desk. "But that's not why you're here, is it? Let's see your progress." Olivia took the folder, opening it to reveal flight data performance metrics and detailed notes on advanced combat maneuvers, information that went far beyond her official training. "I've been practicing the terrain-hugging approach you suggested," she said, her demeanor shifting to intense focus, "using the valley contours to mask radar signature while maintaining just enough altitude to avoid turbulence from ground effect." For the past 18 months, Rodriguez had been Olivia's secret mentor, providing access to classified mission reports, advanced combat tactics, and the kind of practical knowledge that came only from decades of working with the world's best pilots. What they were doing wasn't strictly against regulations, but it certainly existed in a gray area that could raise eyebrows. The truth, which few on the base suspected, was that Lieutenant Olivia Reynolds was not merely a competent pilot with good technical knowledge. Under Rodriguez's guidance, she had secretly studied every combat mission report from the Gulf War through Afghanistan, analyzed flight recorder data from successful strike missions, and practiced advanced combat maneuvers in the simulator during off hours when no one was monitoring. "Your low-altitude control is exceptional," Rodriguez noted, reviewing her latest simulator data. "Better than your father's was at your age, if I'm being honest." Olivia allowed herself a small smile. He saw me in the simulator today. I don't think he was impressed. Jack Reynolds doesn't impress easily, but he notices everything. Rodriguez turned to a locked cabinet, opened it with a key he kept on a chain around his neck, and removed a thick folder marked with classified stamps. I pulled these for you. Mission reports from Operation Mountain Shadow 2018. The terrain profile is similar to what you'd encounter in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Olivia's eyes widened. How did you get these? This operation was barely acknowledged publicly. Rodriguez gave her a knowing look. I've maintained aircraft for every major conflict since Vietnam. People tend to forget the mechanic in the room when they're discussing mission details. I listen, I remember, and I keep what matters. As Olivia leafed through the documents, Rodriguez studied her with fatherly concern. You know, your determination reminds me of your dad when he was young. Same fire in the eyes. I'm nothing like him, Olivia replied automatically. You're more like him than either of you wants to admit. Rodriguez's voice softened. Why are you pushing yourself this hard, Liv? The extra training, the classified reports, the midnight simulator sessions. What are you trying to prove? Olivia was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the flight paths outlined in the mission reports. When I was 12, I found a box of my dad's military citations in the attic. There was a letter from a pilot named Rodriguez, you thanking him for saving your life in Iraq. Rodriguez's expression grew solemn. He never told you about that. Never. I asked him once and he shut down completely. That's when I knew there was more to his story than the perfect career narrative he presented. Olivia closed the folder. I'm not trying to prove anything, Chief. I'm preparing. Because someday I'm going to face the same kind of choice my father did. And when that day comes, I want to be ready. The older man nodded slowly. Just be careful. This kind of preparation, it can make you see threats everywhere, make you too eager to test yourself in situations you might otherwise avoid. I'm not looking for trouble, Chief. No one ever is. But trouble has a way of finding those who are prepared for it. Rodriguez checked his watch. You should get to that briefing. And I should finish this engine overhaul before someone wonders why I'm giving so much attention to a lieutenant's career development. As Olivia gathered the materials, Rodriguez added, your father being here, it might be a good thing, Liv. Maybe it's time you both laid your cards on the table. Olivia tucked the classified folder into her flight bag. Maybe, but some things are better kept in the shadows until the right moment. She left the hangar with quick, purposeful strides, unaware that this day would bring exactly the kind of moment she had been preparing for all along. The main briefing room buzzed with conversation as personnel from various departments gathered for the morning operational update. Commander Marcus Wright stood at the front reviewing notes with his executive officer, occasionally glancing at the door as latecomers filtered in. In the front row, Captain James Blake held court with his usual entourage of junior officers. At 35, Blake had the kind of record that commanded respect, multiple combat deployments, 12 confirmed air-to-air engagements, and a natural leadership quality that drew others to him. His career trajectory pointed straight to command rank, and he knew it. Reynolds is late, Blake remarked to Lieutenant Commander Scott Phillips, his closest ally in the squadron. Probably trying to impress Daddy, Phillips chuckled. Or avoiding him. Word is they haven't spoken much since she insisted on combat training. Can you blame the colonel? He knows combat flying isn't suited for... Blake cut himself off as Commander Wright approached. Captain Blake, Wright said evenly, I trust you're prepared for your role in today's exercise. Always, Commander. My team is ready to provide the opposition force. We'll give the rescue team a run for their money. Wright nodded, his expression neutral. At 45, Marcus Wright was a study in contained intensity. His calm demeanor belied a sharp tactical mind that had served him well during Operation Iraqi Freedom, where he had flown strike missions against hardened targets. He had lost his right pinky finger and suffered burns on his arm when his aircraft was hit by ground fire, but he had completed his mission and brought his damaged plane home safely. Unlike Blake, Wright had seen enough combat to be thoroughly unromantic about it. He valued competence over bravado, results over reputation. This made him one of the few senior officers who judged Olivia Reynolds solely on her abilities, not her gender or her famous father. Just remember the parameters, Wright reminded Blake. This exercise is about testing capabilities, not about individual glory. Of course, sir, Blake replied smoothly. We'll stay within the scenario guidelines. As Wright moved away, Blake turned back to Phillips. Within guidelines doesn't mean we can't make it challenging. Reynolds wants to play with the big boys. Let's see how she handles real pressure. Across the room, Jack Reynolds entered and took a seat in the back, drawing curious glances from personnel who recognized the legendary pilot. Moments later, Olivia slipped in and took an empty seat on the opposite side, pointedly not acknowledging her father's presence. Attention on deck. The call brought everyone to their feet as Captain Thomas Harris entered the room. Harris, the base commander, was a no-nonsense career officer whose ramrod posture and precise movements reflected his Naval Academy background. At 58, his dark hair had gone silver at the temples and deep lines framed his eyes, but his physical condition remained exemplary. He had that rare quality of commanding respect without demanding it. "As you were," Harris said, moving to the front of the room. "Commander Wright, let's proceed with the briefing." Wright stepped forward. "Today's joint exercise will simulate a complex search and rescue operation in contested airspace. The scenario: a Navy helicopter carrying a team of combat engineers has gone down in mountainous terrain under control of hostile forces. 4 crew members are confirmed alive but injured." The lights dimmed as Wright activated a large display screen showing a topographical map of a mountainous region. "The crash site is located here in this valley. The surrounding ridges are equipped with surface-to-air missile systems. Conventional rescue helicopters cannot reach the location without significant risk of being shot down. The terrain is too rugged for rapid ground extraction." Wright continued detailing the exercise parameters, while Jack observed from the back, noting how the scenario mirrored actual conditions military pilots might face in regions like Afghanistan or northern Iraq. This wasn't just a training exercise, it was preparation for the real thing. "Captain Blake's air group will simulate enemy air defenses and interceptors," Wright explained. "Lieutenant Reynolds will lead the reconnaissance element, providing real-time intelligence to the extraction team led by Lieutenant Commander Hawkins." At the mention of Hawkins, attention shifted to a woman seated near the front. Eleanor Hawk Hawkins was 32 with close-cropped black hair and intense green eyes that missed nothing. As one of the few women assigned to support roles with naval special warfare, she had earned her reputation the hard way by being better, faster, and tougher than most of her male counterparts. Hawkins specialized in combat search and rescue operations with additional expertise in advanced weapon systems. She had participated in classified operations that only senior commanders knew about, earning commendations that remained in sealed personnel files. Jack studied Hawkins with professional interest. He had heard of her through military channels, a woman who had repeatedly proven herself in roles traditionally closed to female personnel. In many ways, she represented what Olivia aspired to be, respected for her abilities regardless of gender. As the briefing continued, the door at the back of the room opened quietly. A man in civilian clothes entered, moving with the careful precision of someone accustomed to remaining unnoticed. His military haircut and bearing suggested recent service, but his visitor badge identified him as a contractor. Jack recognized him immediately: Michael Rodriguez, his former crew chief from Desert Storm. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken history passing between them. Jack hadn't known Rodriguez was stationed at this base, though in retrospect it made sense. Rodriguez had always had a knack for being where the action was, even as he approached retirement age. The briefing concluded with Commander Wright addressing final questions about the exercise parameters. As personnel began to disperse, Wright called out, "Lieutenant Reynolds, Lieutenant Commander Hawkins, Captain Blake, a moment, please." The 3 officers approached the front as the room emptied. Jack remained seated, watching from a distance as Wright engaged them in conversation, gesturing occasionally to the map still displayed on the screen. He couldn't hear their discussion, but he recognized the focused expression on his daughter's face, the same look he'd worn countless times when absorbing critical mission details. Rodriguez approached Jack's seat, sitting down beside him without ceremony. "Been a long time, Colonel," Rodriguez said quietly. "Too long, Chief," Jack replied. "You've been keeping an eye on my daughter." It wasn't a question, and Rodriguez didn't treat it as one. "She's exceptional, Jack, one of the best natural pilots I've seen." Jack's jaw tightened. "She's never faced real combat." "Neither had you until you did." Rodriguez studied his old friend. "You didn't come here just to observe an exercise." "I'm not sure why I came," Jack admitted. "Maybe to see if she's making the same mistakes I did. Or maybe to see if she's learned from yours." Rodriguez's voice held no judgment, only the frank assessment of someone who had known Jack at his best and his worst. She knows more about what happened in Iraq than you think. Jack's head snapped toward Rodriguez. What did you tell her? Nothing, but she's smart, Jack. She's pieced things together from declassified reports, from comments dropped by officers who served with you. She knows there's something you're not telling her about why you're so against her flying combat missions. Before Jack could respond, the base alarm system suddenly blared to life, its urgent tone cutting through all conversation. Commander Wright's voice came over the intercom system. All personnel, this is not a drill. Report to emergency stations immediately. Squadron leaders to the command center. Repeat, this is not a drill. The room, which had been nearly empty, suddenly filled with returning personnel, their expressions tense as they awaited information. Captain Harris re-entered, his face grave as he conferred briefly with Aft Wright before addressing the room. Approximately 30 minutes ago, a Navy MH-60 helicopter carrying a team of combat engineers went down in the Safe-Co mountain range along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. 4 crew members are confirmed alive but trapped. Hostile forces have been observed moving toward the crash site. A chill ran through the room as everyone recognized the eerie similarity to the exercise they had been about to undertake. What had been a training scenario moments before was now a life-or-death reality. Harris continued, his voice steady. This was not part of our planned operations. The helicopter was supporting a classified infrastructure assessment when it experienced catastrophic mechanical failure. Due to the sensitive nature of their mission and the equipment on board, it is imperative we reach them before hostile forces do. The map on the display changed to show actual satellite imagery of a rugged mountain range with a red marker indicating the crash site. Jack studied it intently, recognizing the terrain from operations he had supported years earlier. Standard rescue protocols are compromised by the presence of surface-to-air missile systems in these sectors. Harris indicated several positions on the map. Our intelligence indicates Soviet-era SA-8 Gecko systems have been moved into these valleys within the past 48 hours. Conventional rescue helicopters would be highly vulnerable to these weapons. The room was silent as the implications became clear. This was a worst-case scenario: downed personnel in hostile territory with limited rescue options. We need an unconventional approach, Harris stated, his eyes scanning the room. We need a pilot who can fly a small, agile aircraft at extremely low altitude through this terrain, avoid detection, locate the exact crash site, and coordinate with our extraction team. Lieutenant Commander Hawkins stepped forward. Sir, my team can handle the ground extraction if we can get insertion close enough to the site. Harris nodded. Agreed, but we need air support that can operate below radar coverage using terrain masking to avoid detection. His gaze swept the assembled personnel. I need to know right now if we have a pilot with the skills and the courage to attempt this mission. The silence that followed was profound. Every pilot in the room understood the extraordinary difficulty of what was being asked, flying through mountain passes barely wider than an aircraft's wingspan in unpredictable wind conditions, while avoiding both ground fire and detection. From his position at the back of the room, Jack assessed the situation with decades of experience. The mission profile was near suicidal, requiring a combination of exceptional stick and rudder skills, terrain navigation, and split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. The kind of mission that separated the merely competent from the truly gifted. His eyes found Olivia, and he saw in her expression something that sent a chill through him: recognition. This was exactly the kind of scenario she had been preparing for, the kind of impossible situation that had defined his own career. Before he could process this realization, Olivia stood up, her movement deliberate and controlled. I can do it, sir. All heads turned toward her, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to outright dismissal. Captain Blake's face darkened with immediate opposition. Lieutenant Reynolds, Harris acknowledged his expression, revealing nothing of his thoughts. You believe you have the necessary skills for this mission? Yes, sir, Olivia replied, her voice steadied. I've logged over 2,000 hours in low-altitude flight conditions, including extensive training in mountainous terrain navigation. I've studied the topography of this specific region and am familiar with the capabilities and limitations of the SA-8 missile systems we'd be facing. Jack found himself rising to his feet, a protest forming on his lips, but something stopped him. Perhaps it was the absolute conviction in his daughter's voice, Or perhaps it was the memory of himself at her age volunteering for missions others deemed too risky. Captain Blake stepped forward. Sir, with all due respect to Lieutenant Reynolds, this mission requires combat experience. I have 3 tours in similar conditions and direct engagement experience against these weapon systems. Harris considered this. Captain Blake makes a valid point, Lieutenant. This is not a training exercise. No, sir, it isn't, Olivia agreed. Those are 4 real people down there waiting for someone to bring them home. I understand the risks, and I believe my specific skill set is well suited to this mission profile. As murmurs spread through the room, Jack found himself moving forward, drawn by a force he couldn't quite name. He stopped beside Commander Wright, who gave him a questioning look. Colonel Reynolds, Harris acknowledged, noticing Jack's approach. You have something to add. All eyes turned to Jack, including Olivia's. The tension between father and daughter was palpable, their unresolved conflict now playing out before an audience of military personnel in the midst of a life-or-death crisis. Jack drew a deep breath, aware that his next words would shape not only the outcome of this mission, but his relationship with his daughter for years to come. Captain Harris, he began, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command experience. I'd like to offer my assessment of the situation, if I may. The briefing room fell silent as Colonel Jack Reynolds prepared to speak. Decades of command experience had taught him how to control a room with his mere presence. The assembled officers watched with rapt attention, where they were witnessing a pivotal moment between father and daughter that transcended their professional roles. Olivia's face remained impassive, but her eyes betrayed her turmoil. This was the confrontation she had both dreaded and anticipated since joining the Navy. Would her father publicly undermine her capabilities? Would his legendary status sway? Captain Harris's decision. Captain Harris, Jack began, his voice carrying the gravitas earned through countless missions. The terrain in the Safeco range presents unique challenges that few pilots have experienced firsthand. The valleys narrow to less than half a mile in some sections. Downdrafts can drop an aircraft 500 feet in seconds. Radar coverage is inconsistent, making navigation primarily visual in conditions that can change from clear to zero visibility without warning. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on his daughter. This is precisely the type of mission where technical flying ability matters more than combat experience. What's needed isn't someone who can engage enemies, but someone who can avoid detection entirely while maintaining precise control at extremely low altitudes. A murmur rippled through the assembled personnel. No one had expected Colonel Reynolds to support his daughter's volunteering. Captain Blake stepped forward, his jaw tight with barely contained frustration. Colonel Reynolds, with all due respect, your daughter has never flown in hostile airspace. Theory and simulation are not the same as actual combat conditions. You're absolutely right, Captain, Jack agreed, surprising Blake. Combat changes everything for him. It alters your perception, your decision-making, your ability to follow protocols when everything goes sideways. His eyes found Olivia's again, which is why this mission requires someone who will focus on the primary objective without distraction or impulse, someone whose technical precision is second nature. Commander Wright cleared his throat. Sir, if I may, Lieutenant Reynolds does have the highest technical ratings in low-altitude navigation among our current pilots. Her simulator performance in terrain-following scenarios exceeds all established benchmarks. Blake's expression darkened. Simulators don't shoot back, Commander. No, Jack countered, but Lieutenant Reynolds has demonstrated exceptional situational awareness under pressure. The key to this mission isn't engaging hostiles, it's avoiding them altogether while providing critical intelligence to the extraction team. Captain Harris studied both Olivia and Blake thoughtfully. This isn't a combat mission in the traditional sense. We need reconnaissance and coordination, not air-to-ground engagement. Chief Rodriguez, who had remained silent at the back of the room, suddenly stepped forward. Captain Harris, if I may offer some relevant information. Harris nodded, curious about the input from the veteran maintenance chief. Lieutenant Reynolds has been conducting in-depth studies of this specific region for the past 18 months, Rodriguez revealed. She's analyzed declassified mission reports from operations in the Safeco range, including detailed terrain analysis and known air defense positions. Olivia's eyes widened slightly. Rodriguez was exposing their off-the-books training sessions, information that could raise questions about proper protocols and authorization. Is this true, Lieutenant? Harris asked. Olivia straightened her posture. Yes, sir. I've made it a personal project to study mountainous terrain operations with particular focus on the Afghanistan-Pakistan border region. I've reviewed all available mission reports and terrain mapping data. And why this specific region? Lieutenant Harris pressed. Olivia hesitated only briefly. It presents the most complex challenges for low-altitude flying, sir. If you can navigate the safe range, you can handle almost any mountain terrain on Earth. Jack watched his daughter with a new understanding dawning in his eyes. She hadn't been merely pursuing a career path he disapproved of. She had been methodically preparing for exactly this type of situation. Rodriguez continued, additionally, Sir Lieutenant Reynolds has logged over 50 hours in unofficial simulator scenarios, specifically modeling the valleys and wind patterns of this region. Unofficial scenarios. Blake seized on this. So unauthorized training on military equipment? On my authorization, Captain, Rodriguez countered. As Chief of Maintenance, I'm responsible for testing simulator accuracy against real-world conditions. Lieutenant Reynolds volunteered to assist with these evaluations. Jack suppressed a smile. Rodriguez was stretching the truth to protect Olivia, using his senior position to provide cover for what had clearly been off-the-books training sessions. Harris raised a hand to silence the growing debate. The immediate question isn't about protocols, but capabilities. We have 4 service members stranded in hostile territory. Their survival is our priority. He turned to Olivia. Lieutenant Reynolds, walk me through your approach to this mission. Specifically, how would you navigate the ridgelines while avoiding known SAM sites? Without hesitation, Olivia moved to the digital map display. The primary challenge is threading this valley system when she indicated a winding path through the mountains. Conventional wisdom suggests using this wider northern approach, but satellite imagery shows increased activity in these villages, suggesting the potential for visual spotters. Her finger traced an alternative route. I propose coming in from the southeast using this narrower valley. It's technically more challenging to fly, but offers better terrain masking from the known radar positions here and here. She pointed to the marked SAM sites. That valley is barely wide enough for an aircraft, Blake objected. And the crosswinds would be treacherous. Yes, they would, Olivia acknowledged without defensiveness. But the prevailing wind patterns in this region create predictable turbulence. By flying during the early morning hours when katabatic winds flow downslope, we can actually use the air currents to our advantage, maintaining a lower power setting which reduces both heat and sound signatures. Jack watched with growing amazement as his daughter detailed an approach that few seasoned combat pilots would attempt. Her knowledge was comprehensive, her analysis meticulous. Once through this section, Olivia continued, I would establish a holding position in this blind spot between radar coverages, allowing the extraction team to move in under complete aerial surveillance. From this position, I can provide real-time intelligence on enemy movements while remaining virtually undetectable to ground forces. Harris studied the route she had outlined, then looked to Jack. Colonel, your assessment of this approach. Jack stepped closer to the map, examining the proposed flight path with the critical eye of someone who had flown countless missions over a similar terrain. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. It's aggressive, he admitted. Higher risk than the northern approach from a pure flying perspective, but strategically sound. The narrower valley provides better concealment, and Lieutenant Reynolds is correct about the morning wind patterns. It's exactly the approach I would take. The admission clearly cost him something, a concession that his daughter's tactical thinking mirrored his own. Harris made his decision. Lieutenant Reynolds will pilot the reconnaissance aircraft. Captain Blake, your team will prepare for potential air support if the situation escalates. Commander Wright, coordinate with Lieutenant Commander Hawkins on extraction team composition. He checked his watch. We launch in 90 minutes. Dismissed. As the room cleared, Olivia found herself face to face with her father. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of his unexpected support hanging between them. Thank you, she finally said, her voice carefully neutral. Jack's expression remained unreadable. I didn't do it for you. I did it because you're the right pilot for this mission. Still, ma'am, Olivia pressed, it couldn't have been easy to back me publicly. A shadow crossed Jack's face. This isn't over, Olivia. Supporting your capability for this specific mission doesn't mean I've changed my mind about your career path. Before she could respond, Blake approached, his tall frame radiating tension. Lieutenant Reynolds, he acknowledged with bare civility before turning to Jack. Colonel, I respect your combat experience, but with all due respect, your personal connection to the lieutenant may be clouding your judgment. Jack met Blake's gaze evenly. Captain Blake, in my 30 years of service, I've recommended pilots for missions that I knew might be their last. I've written letters to the families of officers who didn't come back. Do you really think I would risk my daughter's life if I didn't believe she was the best qualified pilot for this mission? Blake had no answer for that. With a curt nod, he walked away, leaving father and daughter alone again. He's going to make this difficult, Olivia observed. Yes, Jack agreed, but that's the least of your concerns right now. You have a mission to prepare for. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to review the aircraft specifications with you if you are willing. There might be modifications we could make to enhance your terrain-following capabilities. It was the closest thing to an olive branch he had offered in years. Olivia nodded, recognizing both the professional respect and paternal concern behind the offer. I'd appreciate that, she said simply, and together they walked toward the hangar, the gulf between them not closed but perhaps just a little narrower than before. The maintenance hangar buzzed with activity as ground crews prepared the aircraft for the rescue mission. Chief Rodriguez had assembled his best technicians to modify an FA-18F Super Hornet for the specialized mission parameters. The dual-seat fighter wasn't the standard choice for reconnaissance operations, but its advanced avionics and maneuverability made it ideal for the challenging terrain they would face. Jack Reynolds moved methodically around the aircraft, inspecting every modification, with the practiced eye of someone who understood that the smallest detail could mean the difference between life and death. Olivia stood at his side, absorbing his observations while offering her own insights. They've lightened the weapons load to improve your power-to-weight ratio, Jack noted, examining the reconfigured hardpoints. Single AM-9X Sidewinder on each wing for emergency defense only. The rest is fuel and reconnaissance equipment. Olivia nodded. The reduced weight will help with maneuverability in the mountain passes. Rodriguez joined them, wiping his hands on a rag. We've installed the experimental terrain-following radar system that was scheduled for testing next month. It's not officially cleared for combat operations, but it's the best system we have for this kind of mission. What's the failure rate? Jack asked bluntly. Lower than you'd expect, Rodriguez replied. 3% in simulator testing. But it's a backup system only. This mission will be primarily visual navigation. Jack frowned. 3% is still 3% too high for my liking. We don't have time to requisition a different system, Olivia pointed out. And I've trained with this one in the simulator. I know its limitations. Rodriguez glanced between father and daughter, sensing the tension that still lingered despite their temporary professional alliance. I need to check on the ECM modifications, he said tactfully, giving them space. Back in 10 minutes. As Rodriguez walked away, Jack turned to Olivia. This aircraft was designed for carrier operations and air superiority missions. It's not ideal for what you're attempting. It's what we have, Olivia replied simply, and its thrust-to-weight ratio is actually better than most dedicated reconnaissance platforms. Jack studied his daughter's face, seeing the determination that mirrored his own at her age. You've been preparing for something like this for a long time, haven't you? These unofficial training sessions with Rodriguez. Olivia met his gaze directly. Yes. Why, and don't tell me it was just professional development. She hesitated, waiting how much to reveal. I found your Desert Storm commendation when I was 12. The one that mentioned how you diverted from your primary mission to rescue a downed pilot. Jack's expression hardened. Rodriguez shouldn't have told you about that. He didn't. I found the documents in your home office and pieced it together myself. Olivia's voice remained steady. What I never understood was why a decision that saved a life became something you refused to discuss, something that seemed to haunt you. Jack turned away ostensibly to examine the aircraft's sensor package. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me, Olivia challenged. You've opposed my career choice from day one, not because I'm a woman, but because of something that happened to you. Don't you think I deserve to know what I'm supposedly being protected from? The hangar's background noise seemed to fade as Jack struggled with whether to finally share the burden he had carried for 3 decades. When he spoke, his voice was low, meant only for his daughter. I saved Rodriguez's life that day, but my decision cost 3 other lives. The admission hung heavy in the air between them. The reconnaissance mission I abandoned was critical for a ground assault the next morning. Without complete intelligence, the assault team encountered unexpected resistance. 3 soldiers died clearing rooms that intelligence had indicated were empty. Olivia absorbed this revelation, understanding at last the weight her father had carried. You couldn't have known. That's not the point, Jack said sharply. I made a choice in the moment, based on what I could see right in front of me, a pilot in distress rather than considering the broader mission. It was the right humanitarian choice, but the wrong military one. So that's what this has been about, Olivia said, clarity dawning. You're not afraid I'll fail as a pilot. You're afraid I'll face an impossible choice like you did. Jack finally turned back to her, his composure cracking just enough to reveal the concern beneath. Combat flying isn't just about skill, Olivia. It's about making split-second decisions with incomplete information, decisions that people live or die by. I don't want that burden for you. It's not your burden to prevent, she replied gentler now. And it's not your choice to make. I know that. Intellectually, I know that. Jack ran a hand through his silver hair. But when I think about you facing what I faced, that's why I've been training so hard, Olivia explained. Studying mission reports, learning from others' experiences, preparing for scenarios most pilots never consider. I'm not trying to follow in your footsteps, Dad. I'm trying to learn from them, both your successes and your mistakes. Their conversation was interrupted as Lieutenant Commander Eleanor Hawkins approached her purposeful stride, drawing their attention. Lieutenant Reynolds, Hawkins acknowledged, then nodded respectfully to Jack. Colonel, I hope I'm not interrupting, but we need to coordinate our communication protocols for the mission. Jack recognized the tactical courtesy in Hawkins' timing. She had likely been waiting for an appropriate moment to interrupt what was obviously a personal conversation. Of course, Olivia replied, her demeanor shifting back to professional efficiency. Colonel Reynolds was just providing some insights on the aircraft modifications. Hawkins didn't appear fooled by the explanation, but accepted it without comment. My team will be inserted 15 miles from the crash site using terrain features to mask our approach. Your aerial reconnaissance will be critical for identifying enemy patrols between our insertion point and the objective. I'll establish a holding pattern here. Olivia indicated a position on the tablet Hawkins carried. It gives me the best vantage point while keeping me outside the effective range of the shoulder-launched SAMs they're likely to have. Good. We'll maintain radio silence except for priority communications. If you spot enemy movement that threatens our approach, we've established these coded signals. Hawkins displayed a signal chart with simplified codes that could be transmitted in bursts too short to track. Jack studied the coordination plan with professional interest. Your extraction team composition. 4 operators plus me, Hawkins replied. Small enough to move quickly, large enough to handle the extraction if the survivors are injured. As they continued discussing operational details, Rodriguez returned with an update on the aircraft preparations. We're ahead of schedule. The bird will be ready to fly in 30 minutes. I'll need to brief with the extraction team, Olivia said, recognizing that the mission preparation was moving into its final phase. Jack nodded. I'll complete the aircraft inspection with Chief Rodriguez. As Olivia walked away with Hawkins, Jack turned to his old friend. You've been mentoring her. It wasn't a question, and Rodriguez didn't treat it as one. Someone had to. You weren't exactly volunteering for the job. She's good, Mike, better than I expected. The admission came grudgingly. Better than you were at her age, Rodriguez confirmed, but she's still missing something you had experience with, the fear, real combat fear, the kind that makes your mouth go straight and your hands shake after the mission when no one's watching. Jack frowned. That's exactly what I've been trying to protect her from. And yet here she is about to fly into hostile territory. Rodriguez shook his head. Life has a way of bringing us precisely what we try to avoid, Jack. The question is whether she's prepared for it. Is anyone ever truly prepared for their first combat mission? No, Rodriguez admitted. But she's got something special going for her. What's that? The older mechanic smiled slightly. She's a Reynolds, stubborn as hell and twice as capable. Jack almost smiled at that, but his expression quickly sobered. There's something else you should know, Mike, something about the aircraft. Rodriguez's expression grew concerned. What about it? It's the same model that I was flying during my last mission before retirement. The mission over the same mountain range. Understanding dawned in Rodriguez's eyes. The mission you never talk about. The one that convinced you to hang up your wings for good. Jack nodded grimly. I never told Olivia about it. Never told anyone except my commanding officer. But if she's flying into those mountains in this aircraft, he trailed off, his expression troubled. She should know what happened. Rodriguez finished for him. Whatever it was. Maybe, but not now, not right before the mission. It would only distract her. Jack ran his hand along the aircraft's fuselage. Just make sure this bird is perfect, Mike. Not a single system out of spec. Always do, Colonel. Rodriguez studied his old friend. You know you could go with her. Jack's head snapped up. What? It's a two-seater. She'd benefit from your experience in that terrain, and you'd be there if... Rodriguez let the implication hang in the air. If she faces the same situation I did, Jack finished quietly. The idea took root in Jack's mind, simultaneously terrifying and compelling. To fly again into the same mountains that had ended his career. To be there for his daughter when she needed him most, not as a protective father, but as an experienced aviator. Before he could fully process the suggestion, Commander Wright approached with a grave expression. Colonel Reynolds, Captain Harris wants to see you and Lieutenant Reynolds immediately. We've received updated intelligence on the situation, and it's not good. Captain Harris's office had been transformed into an impromptu command center with additional monitors displaying satellite imagery and intelligence reports. When Jack and Olivia arrived, they found Harris in conversation with Lieutenant Commander Hawkins and Commander Wright. Captain Blake stood to one side, his expression tense. Lieutenant Reynolds, Colonel. Harris acknowledged their arrival. We've received new intelligence that changes our operational parameters significantly. He gestured to the main display where satellite imagery showed increased activity around the crash site. 3 separate hostile groups are converging on the area. Our latest communication from the survivors indicates that Major Williams, the senior officer on the helicopter, has sustained serious injuries and requires immediate medical evacuation. Williams, Jack repeated the name, registering with sudden recognition. Thomas Williams. Harris nodded. You know him? He was my wingman during Desert Storm, Jack said quietly. We flew dozens of missions together. Olivia glanced at her father, this new connection adding another layer of complexity to an already charged situation. The increased hostile presence in Major Williams's condition make this mission even more time-sensitive. Harris continued. However, we've also identified increased air defense activity here and here. He indicated 2 mountain passes that had been part of Olivia's planned route. That severely restricts our approach options, Olivia noted, studying the new intelligence. Precisely why I've asked you both here, Harris said. Colonel Reynolds, your experience with this terrain is valuable, but given these new developments, I believe we need to reconsider our approach entirely. Lieutenant Commander Hawkins spoke up. Sir, with the additional hostiles, my team's ground approach becomes significantly more dangerous. We need better real-time intelligence throughout our movement. Commander Wright nodded in agreement. The reconnaissance aircraft will need to maintain continuous coverage, which increases its exposure time. Jack studied the updated intelligence, his tactical mind evaluating and discarding options. What about a high-altitude approach with paratroopers? Weather conditions make a halo jump too risky, Wright replied, and a conventional paradrop would be too visible. Blake, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. Sir, with these changes, I must formally object to Lieutenant Reynolds piloting this mission. The increased risk factors require combat experience. Harris raised a hand to forestall further debate. I've considered all factors, Captain, but I'm also considering an alternative approach. He turned to Jack. Colonel, the FA-18F is a 2-seater. What if you accompanied Lieutenant Reynolds as a tactical systems officer? The suggestion, the same one Rodriguez had just made, hung in the air like an electrical charge. Olivia's expression reflected her surprise while Jack struggled to maintain his professional composure. Sir, Blake objected, with all due respect, Colonel Reynolds is retired. His flight status, his consultant role includes flight authorization for evaluation purposes. Harris cut him off, and his knowledge of both the terrain and Major Williams's specific medical needs could be invaluable. Olivia found her voice. Captain, while I appreciate the suggestion, I've trained for solo operations. Adding another person to the cockpit changes the dynamic significantly. It also adds 5,000 hours of combat flight experience, Wright pointed out. Jack remained silent, his mind racing through the implications. To return to the cockpit after years of retirement, to fly into the same mountains where he had faced his own demons, to sit in the back seat while his daughter piloted the aircraft. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and compelling. "It's not standard protocol," he finally said. "Nothing about this mission is standard," Harris replied. "4 lives hang in the balance, including a man you served with. We need every advantage we can get." Lieutenant Commander Hawkins stepped closer to the map. "From an extraction team perspective, having both of you would be invaluable. Lieutenant Reynolds has the flying skills we need, while Colonel Reynolds knows the terrain intimately and can focus entirely on threat assessment and coordination with my team." Jack looked at his daughter, trying to gauge her reaction to this unexpected proposal. Her expression remained professional, but he could see the conflict in her eyes. "It's your mission, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "Your aircraft. Your call." Olivia studied her father for a long moment, weighing years of tension against the immediate needs of the mission. "The survivors are the priority," she finally said. "If having Colonel Reynolds as TSO improves our chances of success, then I accept the arrangement." Harris nodded with approval. "Good. Colonel, I'll need your formal acceptance as well." Jack hesitated only briefly. "I accept the assignment, Captain." "Excellent. Commander Wright will handle the necessary paperwork." Harris turned back to the tactical display. "Now with this new configuration, let's reassess our approach options." For the next 30 minutes, they reworked the mission plan, incorporating both Olivia's technical flying expertise and Jack's deep knowledge of the terrain. The tension between father and daughter transformed into a focused professional collaboration that impressed even Blake, though he remained skeptical of the unconventional arrangement. As the briefing concluded, Harris addressed the assembled officers one final time. "We launch in 45 minutes. Commander Wright will coordinate base operations. Lieutenant Commander Hawkins, prepare your extraction team. Captain Blake, your air group will maintain standby status for emergency support if needed." He looked at Jack and Olivia. "Colonel Lieutenant, prepare your aircraft." Dismissed. As they left the briefing room, Blake approached Olivia. "Lieutenant Reynolds," he began, his tone carefully modulated, "I want you to know that while I disagree with this arrangement, I hope for your success. Those are our people down there." Olivia nodded, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. "Thank you, Captain. We'll bring them home." Blake hesitated, then added, "The second you need support, you call it in. No heroics." "Understood, sir." As Blake walked away, Jack and Olivia found themselves alone in the corridor, the reality of their upcoming mission settling over them. "This changes things," Olivia said quietly. "Yes," Jack agreed. "Are you sure you're comfortable with this arrangement?" "Are you?" she countered. "You haven't flown a combat mission in years, and now you're going back to the same mountains where—" She paused, realizing she was broaching the subject he had always avoided. Jack's expression tightened. "Where I made the decision to retire, yes." "What happened there, Dad?" "What aren't you telling me?" Jack checked his watch. "We have 45 minutes until launch. That's not enough time for that story." He met her eyes directly. "But I promise you this, if we make it back from this mission, I'll tell you everything. No more secrets." The promise hung between them, a bridge across years of silence and misunderstanding. Olivia nodded, accepting the terms. "We should get to pre-flight," she said, "and you'll need a flight suit." Jack almost smiled at that. "Been a while since I wore Navy colors. Think they have one that'll fit an old Air Force pilot?" "I'm sure Chief Rodriguez can find something appropriate," Olivia replied, the ghost of a smile crossing her face as well. Together they walked toward the equipment room, father and daughter preparing to fly into danger. Not quite reconciled, but united in purpose for the first time in years. The ready room buzzed with focused activity as Olivia and Jack prepared for the mission. Flight suits had been issued, equipment checked and double-checked, and mission parameters reviewed one final time. Around them, support personnel moved with the practiced efficiency of a well-oiled machine, each person understanding their role in the complex operation about to unfold. Chief Rodriguez personally supervised the final preparations of their aircraft, his experienced hands checking connections and systems with meticulous care. The FA-18F Super Hornet gleamed under the hangar lights, its sleek form modified for the specialized mission ahead. Terrain following radar is operating within optimal parameters, Rodriguez reported as Jack inspected the system readouts. ECM Suite has been upgraded with the latest jamming frequencies for the SA-8 systems. You'll have about 30 seconds of effective jamming if detected enough time to change course and find terrain masking. Jack nodded, his attention focused on the technical details that could mean the difference between success and failure. Fuel consumption calculations. Based on the revised flight plan, you'll have approximately 20 minutes of loiter time at the target area before hitting bingo fuel for return. That's with a 15% reserve for contingencies. Not much margin for error, Jack noted. No, sir, Rodriguez agreed, but Lieutenant Reynolds is known for her fuel efficiency. She consistently returns with more reserve than most pilots. Jack allowed himself a small smile. She got that from her mother. Margaret could stretch $1 further than anyone I've ever known. Rodriguez chuckled. And here I thought it was your influence all these years. Don't tell her that. She's convinced I've had nothing to do with her development as a pilot. Jack's expression sobered. Maybe she's right. You've had more influence than you realize, Colonel Rodriguez said quietly. Why do you think she studies mission reports so intently? She's been trying to understand you, to learn from your experiences even when you wouldn't share them directly. Jack absorbed this insight with a thoughtful nod. I've made mistakes, Mike. We all have. The question is whether we let others learn from them. Rodriguez handed Jack a small leather case. Your old knee board, thought you might want it for this mission. Jack took the worn leather case with surprise. You kept this all these years. Some things are worth holding on to, Rodriguez replied simply, especially pieces of history. Across the hangar, Olivia was engaged in intense conversation with Lieutenant Commander Hawkins, reviewing the coordination plans for the extraction team. Once we locate the crash site, I'll establish this holding pattern, Olivia indicated on the tactical map. It gives me the best vantage point while keeping the aircraft outside the effective range of shoulder-launched SAMs. Hawkins nodded. My team will move along this ridgeline using these rock formations for cover. Your overhead surveillance will be critical for identifying enemy patrols between our position and the objective. We've established these communication protocols, Olivia confirmed, displaying a signal chart with simplified codes. Short bursts, too brief to track. Good. Hawkins studied Olivia for a moment. How are you feeling about flying with your father? Olivia maintained her professional demeanor. It's a tactical advantage for the mission. That's not what I asked. With a glance to ensure Jack was still across the hangar, Olivia lowered her voice. Honestly, I don't know. We haven't exactly had the best relationship these past few years. Family is complicated, Hawkins acknowledged, but in my experience, nothing reveals a person's true character like a combat situation. That's what I'm afraid of, Olivia admitted. What if he doesn't trust my judgment? What if I prove him right about women in combat roles? Hawkins' expression hardened slightly. Lieutenant, I've operated in combat zones for 12 years. I've led extraction teams under enemy fire-coordinated airstrikes and carried wounded men twice my size out of ambushes. Not once has my gender been relevant to my performance. How do you deal with the doubters? Olivia asked. The Blakes of the world. I don't waste energy on them, Hawkins replied. Results speak louder than any argument. Just fly your mission, Lieutenant. The rest will take care of itself. Olivia nodded, drawing strength from the older woman's confidence. Thank you, Commander. Eleanor, Hawkins corrected with a slight smile. When we're in the field, it's Eleanor. Olivia, she responded in kind. Their conversation was interrupted as Commander Wright approached with a weather update. Latest meteorological data shows deteriorating conditions in the target area. Cloud ceiling dropping to 1,500 feet in some valleys, with gusty winds along the ridgelines. That's going to make terrain following even more challenging, Olivia noted, studying the weather patterns. It also works to our advantage, Wright pointed out. Lower cloud cover will help conceal your approach in the extraction team's movements. What about the survivors? Olivia asked. Any update on Major Williams's condition? Wright's expression grew more serious. Last communication indicates he's stable but deteriorating. Possible internal bleeding. The other 3 crew members have minor to moderate injuries, but all are mobile. Jack joined the group, having completed his inspection of the aircraft. Thomas Williams is tough, he said. If anyone can hold on, it's him. Wright nodded. Captain Harris asked me to inform you that launch time has been moved up by 15 minutes due to the weather patterns. We need to get you airborne before the front advances further. Understood, Olivia acknowledged. We'll be ready. As Wright departed, Jack turned to his daughter. I've completed the systems check. Everything looks operational. Good, Olivia replied, maintaining her professional demeanor despite the personal undercurrents. I've just finished coordination with Lieutenant Commander Hawkins. Jack nodded to Hawkins. Your team is prepared for insertion. Yes, sir. We'll be moving out as soon as your aircraft is airborne to establish our forward position. We'll provide the intelligence you need, Jack assured her. Just bring our people home safely. That's the plan, Colonel. Hawkins checked her watch. I need to finalize preparations with my team. Good hunting to both of you. With a respectful nod, she departed, leaving father and daughter alone. For a moment, neither spoke, the weight of the upcoming mission hanging between them. We should complete final preparations, Olivia finally said, turning toward the equipment area. Jack caught her arm gently. Olivia, wait. There's something I need to say before we go up there. She paused, her expression guarded. We don't have much time, Dad. I know, this won't take long. Jack took a deep breath. Whatever happens up there, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Not just for your skills as a pilot, but for your determination. Your mother would be proud too. Olivia's professional mask slipped slightly, revealing the daughter beneath the lieutenant. You've never said that before. I should have, Jack admitted, many times over, but I let my fears for your safety overshadow my pride in your accomplishments. Dad, let me finish, he interrupted gently. Up there, I'm your tactical systems officer. You're the pilot in command. I will follow your lead and support your decisions. I give you my word on that. Olivia studied her father's face, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Thank you, she said simply. Their moment was interrupted by the announcement over the hangar speakers. Lieutenant Reynolds and Colonel Reynolds report to final briefing. Launch in 20 minutes. Reality rushed back in as they gathered their flight gear and moved toward the briefing room for the final mission review. Whatever reconciliation had begun between them would have to wait. The mission now took precedence over everything else. The pre-flight briefing concluded with Captain Harris addressing the assembled team one final time. This mission has 3 critical objectives: locate the precise position of the downed helicopter, provide real-time intelligence to the extraction team, and coordinate their approach to avoid enemy contact. Lieutenant Reynolds, Colonel Reynolds, the lives of our people depend on your successful execution of these objectives. Understood, sir, Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the pressure. Communication protocols are established. Contingency plans are in place. Harris surveyed the room. Are there any final questions? When none were raised, he nodded firmly. Very well. Godspeed and good hunting. Dismissed. As the briefing room cleared, Olivia found herself momentarily alone. The others had moved toward the flight line, but she had deliberately lingered, needing a moment of solitude before the mission. She stood by the window, watching ground crews making final preparations on the tarmac. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders. 4 lives depended on her skills as a pilot. Her father would be watching her every move. The doubters like Blake would be waiting for her to fail. The confidence she had projected throughout the planning phase wavered slightly in these final private moments. Nervous, Olivia turned to find Eleanor Hawkins standing in the doorway, her expression understanding rather than judgmental. Focused, Olivia replied automatically. Hawkins smiled slightly. It's okay to be both. Anyone who says they don't feel fear before a mission like this is either lying or a fool. Olivia hesitated, then admitted, I've trained for this, prepared for it, but it's different when it's real, Hawkins finished for her. When actual lives hang in the balance. Yes. Hawkins moved to stand beside her at the window. Before my first combat mission, my commanding officer told me something I've never forgotten. He said, fear is just your body's way of telling you that what you're doing matters. Olivia considered this. That's actually helpful. I thought it might be. Hawkins watched the activity on the tarmac for a moment before continuing. You know I've been where you are, the only woman in rooms full of men who are just waiting for you to fail. How did you handle it? By understanding that their doubt says more about them than it does about me. Hawkins turned to face Olivia directly. Listen carefully because this matters. You are not flying this mission to prove anything to Captain Blake or to your father, or to anyone else. You're flying it because those four people need the best pilot available, and right now, that's you. The simple directness of Hawkins's words cut through Olivia's anxiety, refocusing her on what truly mattered. Thank you, Commander. Eleanor, she corrected again with a slight smile. Eleanor, Olivia acknowledged, my extraction team is in good hands with you leading it, and our air support is in good hands with you. Hawkins checked her watch. You should get going. Your father is probably wondering where you are. With a grateful nod, Olivia gathered her remaining gear and headed for the flight line, her steps more purposeful than before. Hawkins had reminded her of what was essential, the mission itself, not the opinions surrounding it. Outside, the weather had begun to deteriorate, with low clouds gathering on the horizon and gusting winds sweeping across the tarmac. Ground crews worked efficiently, completing final preparations on the FA-18F Super Hornet that would carry Olivia and Jack into hostile territory. Jack stood beside the aircraft conversing with Chief Rodriguez, who was making a final inspection of the external systems. When he spotted Olivia approaching, Jack excused himself and met her halfway. Everything all right? He asked, noting her slightly delayed arrival. Yes, sir. Just reviewing some final details with Lieutenant Commander Hawkins. Jack studied his daughter's face, recognizing the focused determination that had replaced her earlier tension. Something had changed during her brief absence, a settling of purpose that reminded him of his own pre-mission rituals from years past. Chief Rodriguez reports all systems are golden, he informed her. Weather is deteriorating faster than predicted, but still within operational parameters. Good, Olivia replied, adjusting her flight gear. We should get moving. As they walked toward the aircraft, Jack felt the familiar pre-mission tension that he hadn't experienced in years. Despite his outward calm, his heart rate had increased, and his senses seemed heightened, the body's natural response to anticipated danger. He had forgotten how it felt, this strange mixture of fear and readiness that preceded every combat flight. Rodriguez met them at the aircraft ladder, his weathered face serious. Everything's set. I've personally checked every system twice. And thank you, Chief, Olivia said. Good hunting, Lieutenant, Rodriguez replied, then turned to Jack. You too, Colonel. Bring her back in one piece. The double meaning was clear. Bring both the aircraft and Olivia home safely. Count on it, Jack assured him. As Rodriguez stepped back, Olivia paused at the bottom of the ladder, suddenly aware of the historical significance of the moment. She was about to fly a combat mission with her father, something neither of them had ever anticipated. Ladies first, Jack said, gesturing to the ladder. Olivia climbed up and settled into the front seat of the tandem cockpit, beginning her pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency. Jack followed, taking the rear seat that would normally be occupied by a weapons systems officer, but now configured for his role as tactical systems coordinator. Ground crew secured their harnesses and helped with final equipment checks before closing the canopy, sealing them into the high-tech cocoon that would carry them over some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth. As they ran through the startup sequence, Olivia's voice came through Jack's headset, professional and focused. All systems online, avionics green, engines spooling normally. Roger that, Jack acknowledged, monitoring his own system's displays. ECM suite operational, communications check. Their voices mingled with those of the control tower as they completed the necessary protocols, the familiar rhythm of pre-flight communications creating a structured framework that helped manage the tension of the moment. Tower, this is Shadow 1 requesting clearance for takeoff. Olivia transmitted when all checks were complete. Shadow 1 Tower, you are cleared for takeoff on runway 27, winds 280 at 15 knots, gusting to 25. Mission clock is active. Godspeed. Roger Tower, Shadow 1 rolling. Olivia advanced the throttles smoothly and the powerful engines of the FA-18F responded immediately. The Super Hornet accelerated down the runway, gathering speed with impressive rapidity until Olivia pulled back on the stick, lifting the nose toward the cloudy sky above. The sensation of takeoff, that magical moment when gravity releases its hold and the aircraft becomes truly airborne, affected both Reynolds in different ways. For Olivia, it was the familiar beginning of another flight, albeit one with unprecedented stakes. For Jack, it was a powerful reminder of the life he had left behind, the unique freedom that only pilots truly understand. As the landing gear retracted with a mechanical whine and the aircraft climbed toward its initial cruising altitude, father and daughter were united in purpose, whatever their personal differences. Behind them, the naval air station grew smaller until it disappeared beneath the cloud layer, leaving them alone in the vast sky, heading toward distant mountains, where danger and perhaps understanding awaited them. Course set for initial waypoint, Olivia reported, banking the aircraft toward the first leg of their journey. Time to target area approximately 45 minutes. Roger that, Jack replied, settling into his role as tactical systems officer, beginning terrain mapping and threat assessment protocols. The mission had begun. Whatever happened next would test not only their skills as aviators, but their ability to work together as father and daughter pilot and tactical officer, two generations of military aviators facing a common challenge. In the cockpit of the Super Hornet, surrounded by the advanced technology of modern aerial warfare, they flew toward uncertain fate not as Colonel and Lieutenant Reynolds, but simply as two pilots dedicated to bringing their comrades home safely regardless of the cost. The FA-18F Super Hornet sliced through the morning sky, maintaining a cruising altitude that kept them above the scattered cloud layer. The rising sun painted the clouds below in hues of gold and amber, creating a deceptively peaceful scene that belied the danger of their mission. In the cockpit, Olivia Reynolds maintained a steady hand on the controls, her eyes constantly scanning both the horizon and the instrument panel before her. Approaching waypoint Alpha, she reported, her voice calm and professional over the intercom. Beginning descent in 30 seconds. Roger that, Jack acknowledged from the rear seat. Threat assessment systems are online. No active radar signatures detected yet, but we're still outside their probable range. The first phase of their flight had been uneventful, following established air corridors through friendly airspace. Now they were approaching the border region where the real challenges would begin. Soon they would drop below radar coverage, flying dangerously close to the rugged terrain to avoid detection. Descending now, Olivia announced, easing the stick forward. The Super Hornet responded smoothly, its nose dipping as they began a controlled descent toward the cloud layer below. As they pierced the clouds, visibility dropped momentarily to zero, the cockpit filled with swirling white vapor that obscured all external reference points. Olivia relied entirely on her instruments, maintaining a precise descent rate and heading despite the disorienting conditions. Then they broke through the underside of the cloud deck and the landscape revealed itself below them, a vast expanse of mountain ranges stretching to the horizon, their peaks and valleys creating a natural maze of stone and shadow. The terrain was unforgiving, offering no flat areas for emergency landings, no room for navigational errors. Beginning terrain following protocols, Olivia stated, bringing the aircraft lower, her hands making subtle adjustments to account for the changing air currents as they neared the ground. Jack felt the familiar sensation of his stomach rising as the aircraft descended rapidly, muscle memory from thousands of similar maneuvers returning despite his years away from the cockpit. His eyes alternated between the tactical display and the actual terrain ahead, comparing digital projections with reality. Entering the first valley in 30 seconds, he informed Olivia. Initial radar sweeps show it clear of hostiles, but maintain caution. These mountains create radar shadows where smaller units can hide. Understood, Olivia acknowledged, banking the aircraft slightly to align with the approaching valley entrance. The Super Hornet dropped lower still, now flying less than 500 feet above the valley floor. At this altitude, the sense of speed intensified dramatically, the ground seemingly rushing past beneath them at tremendous velocity. Olivia's flying was precise, keeping them centered in the valley, where the terrain provided maximum concealment from potential hostile observers. Jack studied the surrounding ridgelines with experienced eyes, searching for any signs of human activity, a glint of metal, an unnatural pattern among the rocks, anything that might indicate an enemy presence. The tactical systems in the aircraft were sophisticated, but he trusted his visual assessment, equally knowing that technology sometimes missed what human intuition could detect. First checkpoint clear, he reported as they navigated through the initial valley segment. Turn coming up in 15 seconds. Valley narrows to approximately 800 meters width. Olivia prepared for the turn, judging wind conditions and calculating the optimal bank angle. Roger that, adjusting power for the turn. The aircraft banked smoothly, following the contour of the valley as it curved to the southeast. The walls rose higher on either side, creating a natural corridor that both concealed them from radar and constrained their maneuverability. Flying in these conditions required absolute concentration and split-second timing. You're flying well, Jack commented, genuine respect in his voice. Maintaining perfect terrain separation. Thanks, Olivia replied, her focus unwavering. But we haven't hit the challenging sections yet. And as if to punctuate her point, the valley ahead narrowed significantly, its walls closing in like the jaws of some enormous stone predator. Simultaneously, the tactical display lit up with a warning indicator. Radar emission detected, Jack reported immediately, bearing 035 beyond the next ridgeline. Characteristics match SA-8 search radar, but we're still below their line of sight. Adjusting course to maintain terrain masking, Olivia responded, bringing the aircraft even lower now, just 300 feet above the valley floor. The Super Hornet threaded through the narrow passage, its wingtips seemingly close enough to brush the rock walls on either side. The sensation was claustrophobic, intensified by the knowledge that any significant mechanical failure at this altitude and speed would be catastrophic. Valley widens ahead, Jack noted, studying both the tactical display and the approaching terrain. But we have less cover from the eastern ridgeline. Recommend maintaining current altitude and speed. Concur, Olivia acknowledged, her hands steady on the controls, despite the increasing turbulence as wind currents swirled through the mountain passages. For the next 15 minutes, they navigated the complex valley system, each turn presenting new challenges, unexpected downdrafts that threatened to push them into the terrain narrow passages that required precise control and the constant risk of detection by enemy radar systems scanning from distant peaks. Jack found himself impressed by his daughter's flying skills. Her control was exceptional, her situational awareness comprehensive. She anticipated challenges before they fully manifested, making small adjustments that prevented larger problems. It was the kind of flying that came from innate talent, refined by rigorous training and genuine dedication. Approaching the most challenging section, Jack warned, as they neared a particularly treacherous stretch of their route. The valley ahead forks with the eastern branch leading directly toward our objective, but exposing us to potential radar coverage from Site Bravo. Olivia processed this information quickly. What about the western branch? Does it offer an alternative approach? It's longer by approximately 12 miles and narrower, but it keeps us completely masked from known radar positions. Fuel considerations, Olivia asked, already calculating the implications. We'd reduce our loiter time at the objective by about 4 minutes, Jack replied, having made the same calculations. But we'd maintain complete surprise. Olivia made her decision. Taking the western route, the extraction team will benefit more from our surprise arrival than from an extra 4 minutes of coverage. Agreed, Jack said, noting with approval how she had prioritized mission effectiveness over the more direct approach. Western branch in 20 seconds. And the aircraft banked again, following the less obvious path through the mountains. The valley immediately narrowed, forcing Olivia to reduce their speed slightly to maintain safe clearance from the encroaching walls. This section has unusual wind patterns, Jack cautioned, recalling details from maps he had studied years earlier. The mountains funnel morning air currents into unpredictable speeds. Before he could finish, the aircraft suddenly dropped as if the air beneath its wings had vanished. Olivia reacted instantly, increasing power and adjusting the control surfaces to arrest their descent. The Super Hornet responded, but not before they had lost nearly 100 feet of altitude in seconds. Just as I was saying, Jack commented dryly once they had stabilized. Thanks for the warning, Olivia replied, a hint of tension finally showing in her voice. Any other surprises I should know about? The next 3 miles feature similar drafts. They're caused by temperature differentials between sun-facing and shadowed rock faces. Olivia nodded, absorbing this information and adjusting her flying accordingly. She maintained slightly higher power settings, giving her more reserve to counter sudden downdrafts while keeping their altitude low enough to utilize the terrain for concealment. As they navigated this challenging section, Jack continued monitoring the tactical systems. Still no direct radar hits on our position, but increased activity overall. They know something's happening, just not exactly what or where. How far to the crash site? Olivia asked, her eyes never leaving the terrain ahead. Approximately 18 miles following this route. We should have visual in about 9 minutes, assuming current speed. The valley began to widen slightly, offering more maneuvering room, but also potentially exposing them to detection from above. Olivia maintained their course along the western edge, where overhanging rock formations provided additional concealment. Lieutenant Commander Hawkins' team should be approaching their insertion point now, Jack noted, checking the mission timeline. They'll begin their movement toward the objective once we confirm the crash site location and provide threat assessment. Understood, Olivia acknowledged. I'll establish the surveillance pattern as soon as we verify the site. The minutes ticked by as they continued their approach, each passing mile, bringing them closer to the heart of hostile territory. The tension in the cockpit was palpable, but controlled, both pilots focused entirely on their respective tasks. Then as they rounded a particularly sharp bend in the valley, Jack suddenly leaned forward in his seat. Movement at 2 o'clock along the ridgeline. Magnifying now. The targeting system zoomed in on the indicated position, revealing several armed figures moving along a mountain trail. Their distinctive clothing and equipment identified them immediately. Hostile patrol, Jack confirmed. Approximately 8 individuals moving toward the crash site area. They haven't spotted us. Recording their position for Hawkins's team, Olivia responded, activating the reconnaissance systems to mark the enemy position on their shared tactical map. More movement at 11 o'clock. Jack reported, his experienced eyes catching what the automated systems had missed. Second patrol, smaller group already closer to the objective. Olivia adjusted their course slightly, keeping the aircraft in the deepest shadow of the valley wall. Do they have anti-aircraft capabilities? Can't confirm visually, but I'd assume shoulder-launched missiles at minimum, Jack replied. Standard procedure for their patrols in this region. The Super Hornet continued its advance, now flying in a heightened state of alert. Both Reynolds maintained disciplined silence, communicating only essential information as they approached the critical phase of their mission. Valley opens into a wider basin ahead, Jack informed Olivia. Satellite imagery placed the crash site near the eastern edge in a small clearing among the pine forest. Roger that, preparing for final approach and surveillance pattern establishment. As the valley walls receded and the landscape opened before them, Olivia kept the aircraft low, using a line of taller trees for additional concealment. The morning sun now higher in the sky, eliminating the shadows that had helped hide their approach. Visual on the crash site, Jack announced suddenly. 11 o'clock, half a mile. I can see the helicopter wreckage. Olivia banked slightly, bringing the crash site into her field of view. The downed MH-60 lay partially hidden among the trees, its main rotor separated, and its fuselage showing significant damage. Despite the destruction, there were hopeful signs. No fire damage was visible, and a makeshift perimeter had been established around the site, indicating the survivors had secured their position. No visible movement at the site itself, Olivia noted. Could they have moved to a more defensible position? Possible, but unlikely given Major Williams's reported injuries, Jack replied. More likely they're maintaining cover to avoid detection. The hostiles haven't reached their position yet. Olivia established a wide circular surveillance pattern around the crash site, maintaining enough distance to avoid drawing attention while keeping the area under constant observation. From this position, they could monitor all approaches to the downed helicopter and relay critical information to the extraction team. Activating secure communication link with Hawkins's team, Jack reported, initializing the encrypted channel. Transmitting updated tactical data now. The aircraft systems compiled their reconnaissance information, enemy patrol locations, terrain features, potential landing zones for extraction, and transmitted it in compressed data bursts, too brief to be effectively tracked by enemy signal intelligence. Hawkins confirms receipt of data, Jack informed Olivia after a moment. They're adjusting their approach route to avoid the patrols we identified. Good, Olivia acknowledged. How long until they reach the crash site? Approximately 40 minutes at their current pace. They're moving carefully to avoid detection. Olivia checked their fuel status. That gives us about 30 minutes of loiter time before we need to consider fuel reserves for return. We can extend that by another 5 minutes if we accept a tighter fuel margin, Jack suggested. Let's hold that a contingency, Olivia decided. For now, we maintain standard reserves. As they continued their surveillance pattern, Jack's attention was drawn to movement near the crash site. I have visual confirmation of survivors. 2 individuals briefly exposed position at the southeastern edge of the wreckage. The targeting system zoomed in, capturing images of the survivors before they ducked back into cover. The footage confirmed what they had hoped: the crew was alive and maintaining defensive positions around their downed aircraft. Can you identify Major Williams? Olivia asked, unable to examine the footage closely while piloting. Jack studied the images. Negative. The individuals we saw were wearing standard flight crew gear. Couldn't make out faces or rank insignia. They completed another circuit of their surveillance pattern, gathering additional intelligence on enemy movements and potential extraction routes. The situation was developing according to plan, but Jack felt an increasing sense of unease. Years of combat experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about the current scenario didn't feel right. Expanding our surveillance radius, he decided. I want to check the approaches from the north and east again. Olivia adjusted their flight path, accordingly widening their circuit to encompass a larger area around the crash site. As they passed over a ridgeline to the northeast, Jack's suspicions were confirmed. Additional hostile force approaching from the northeast, he reported urgently. Much larger than the patrols we identified earlier. I count at least 20 personnel with what appears to be vehicle support on the logging road. Olivia processed this new information quickly. That significantly changes the extraction timeline. Hawkins's team won't reach the crash site before this larger force. Agreed, Jack said grimly. And there's more. I'm detecting radar emissions consistent with a mobile SA-8 launcher accompanying the main force. They're bringing in heavier anti-aircraft capabilities than we anticipated. The situation had suddenly become far more complex and dangerous. The extraction team was too far away to reach the survivors before the approaching enemy force in the presence of the mobile SAM launcher threatened both their aircraft and any potential rescue helicopters. We need to warn the survivors and relay this information to Hawkins immediately. Olivia stated, already calculating potential options. Transmitting updated threat assessment now. Jack confirmed, sending another encrypted data burst to the extraction team. But we have a decision to make, Lieutenant. This larger force changes our operational parameters significantly. Olivia knew exactly what her father was referring to. Their mission was reconnaissance and coordination, not direct engagement. But with the survivors now facing imminent capture or worse, the parameters of their mission might need to be reconsidered. What's your assessment of the situation, Colonel? She asked, temporarily setting aside their father-daughter relationship in favor of military experience. Jack studied the tactical display, weighing options and risks with the rapid calculation of a veteran combat pilot. The extraction team cannot reach the crash site before the main hostile force arrives. The survivors have no chance against a force that size. And once the mobile SAM launcher is in position, air extraction becomes nearly impossible. So we need to delay the main force, Olivia concluded, following the same logical progression. Yes, Jack agreed, but that means abandoning our strictly reconnaissance role and potentially exposing our presence. Olivia completed another circuit, her mind racing through the implications and possibilities. We have limited air-to-ground capability with the weapons load we're carrying, not enough to engage the entire force directly. No, Jack concurred, but we might not need to engage them directly. Sometimes perception is more important than reality. Olivia glanced back briefly. What are you suggesting? The logging road they're using passes through a narrow ravine about 2 miles from their current position, Jack explained. If we could trigger a landslide or rockfall to block that ravine, we could force them to take an alternate route that would add hours to their approach. Without directly engaging them, Olivia noted, understanding the strategy. But how do we trigger a landslide with our limited weapons? Jack pointed to a specific section on the tactical display. This rock face above the ravine is already unstable. See the recent slide patterns. A precisely placed shot could trigger a larger collapse. Olivia considered the proposal, evaluating risks and benefits. We'd need to break our surveillance pattern and approach from a different angle to get a clean shot. That increases our risk of detection. Yes, Jack acknowledged. It's your call, Lieutenant. This is your aircraft and your mission. The weight of command settled fully on Olivia's shoulders as she faced exactly the kind of decision her father had warned about, one with imperfect information, significant risks, and lives hanging in the balance. This wasn't a simulation or a training exercise. Real people would live or die based on her choice. After a moment of intense consideration, she made her decision. We'll attempt to block the road. The survival of the downed crew takes priority over maintaining our covert status. Agreed, Jack said simply, respecting her decision without further comment. Plotting approach vector now. Olivia continued, already adjusting their flight path. We'll come in from the west using the morning sun to mask our approach. One pass, one shot, then we return to surveillance position. Roger that, Jack replied. preparing the weapon systems, setting up targeting parameters for optimal effect on the rock face. The Super Hornet banked away from its surveillance pattern, climbing slightly to gain the altitude necessary for their new approach. Olivia's movements were precise and deliberate, her focus absolute as she executed the complex maneuver. Approaching firing position in 30 seconds, she announced. Weapons is status. Single AGM-65 Maverick armed and ready, Jack confirmed. Targeting solution locked on the upper section of the rock face. Maximum debris pattern calculated for complete road coverage. The aircraft lined up perfectly for the approach, the sun at their backs as Olivia had planned. Below them, the unsuspecting enemy force continued its advance along the logging road, still unaware of the Super Hornet's presence. In range in 5 seconds, Jack reported. 4, 3, 2. Victor once weapon away. The missile detached from the aircraft's hardpoint and streaked toward its target, covering the distance in seconds before impacting precisely where Jack had aimed. The explosion seemed almost insignificant. At first, a small bloom of fire and smoke against the massive rock face. Then the secondary effects began exactly as they had hoped. The initial blast destabilized the already precarious rock formation, sending massive boulders tumbling down toward the road below. Within moments, a full-scale landslide was in progress, thousands of tons of rock and debris cascading down the mountainside. Direct hit, Jack confirmed. Road completely blocked. No casualties visible from the hostile force, but they're now effectively cut off from their primary approach route. Breaking away, Olivia announced, banking the aircraft sharply and accelerating away from the area, returning to surveillance position via alternate route to avoid potential air defense activation. The Super Hornet sped away from the engagement zone, hugging the terrain to minimize the chance of detection. The missile launch had compromised their purely covert status, but if they could return to their surveillance position quickly enough, the enemy might not connect the landslide to their presence. Hostile force has halted, Jack reported, monitoring the tactical display. They appear to be assessing the situation. No signs they've identified us as the cause yet. Good, Olivia acknowledged. What about the mobile SAM launcher? Still with the main force, no indications it's being deployed separately. Jack continued monitoring as they returned to their surveillance position above the crash site. The survivors at the crash site are showing increased activity. They may have heard the explosion. Let's establish communication with them, Olivia decided. They need to know extraction is coming, but also that the timeline has changed. Jack initiated a secure communication channel using the emergency frequencies the downed helicopter would be monitoring. Fallen Angel, this is Shadow 1. Do you copy? Over? After a moment of static, a voice responded, weak but clear. Shadow 1, this is Fallen Angel. We read you. Status 4 Souls 1 critical. Over. Fallen Angel, we have visual on your position. Extraction team is inbound, ETA approximately 35 minutes. Be advised, large hostile force has been delayed, but still approaching from the northeast. Recommend preparation for immediate evacuation upon extraction team arrival. Over. Copy that, Shadow 1, the voice replied, relief evident despite the professional tone. We'll be ready. The critical patient is stable but needs immediate medical evacuation. Over. Jack hesitated briefly before asking, Fallen Angel, can you confirm the status of Major Williams? Over. A pause, then. Major Williams is the critical patient, sir. Internal bleeding and possible spinal injuries. He's conscious, but immobile. Over. Understood, Fallen Angel. Maintain your position and stand by for extraction. Shadow 1 will provide overwatch. Out. Jack switched back to the intercom. They're alive, but Tom is in bad shape. Olivia heard the personal concern in her father's voice. We'll get them out, Dad. All of them. For the next 20 minutes, they maintained their surveillance pattern, monitoring both the crash site and the enemy forces. The main hostile group had indeed been stymied by the landslide, forced to backtrack and seek an alternate route that would significantly delay their arrival. Extraction team reports they're now 20 minutes from the objective, Jack informed Olivia after receiving an encrypted transmission. They've avoided all patrols and are making good progress. Fuel status, Olivia asked. We're approaching bingo fuel for standard reserves, Jack replied. Decision point in approximately 10 minutes. Olivia nodded, knowing they would soon face another difficult choice: maintain their protective overwatch or depart to ensure their own safe return. Before she could consider further, the tactical warning system suddenly blared an alert. Radar lock, Jack announced sharply. SAM site active at bearing 140 miles. They've spotted us. The immediate threat demanded instant response. Olivia banked the aircraft hard, simultaneously deploying countermeasures. Engaging defensive systems. ECM active. Missile launch detected. Jack reported, his voice tense but controlled. Two SAMs inbound bearing 140 closing rapidly. Olivia pushed the Super Hornet into a steep dive, heading directly for the valley floor, where the terrain would provide some protection from the incoming missiles. The aircraft's warning systems continued their urgent alerts as the SAMs tracked toward them. First missile defeated by countermeasures, Jack announced as one of the threat indicators disappeared from their display. Second still tracking, adjusting course to follow us. Deploying additional countermeasures, Olivia responded, releasing another cloud of chaff and flares while continuing their evasive maneuvers. The second missile detonated close enough to rock the aircraft with its concussion, but not close enough to cause damage. Olivia maintained control through the turbulence, keeping them low and fast as they sought cover in the valley system. We've been compromised, she stated the obvious. Any additional launches? Negative for now, but they know we're here, Jack replied, continuing to monitor the threat displays. They'll be looking for us, and they'll connect our presence with the downed helicopter. Which puts additional pressure on the extraction timeline, Olivia concluded. The survivors need to be moved before the enemy realizes why we're here. Jack nodded grimly. And we have another problem. Our fuel situation is becoming critical after those evasive maneuvers. We're now below bingo fuel for standard reserves. The situation had deteriorated rapidly. They were now operating in known hostile airspace, with compromised stealth dwindling fuel reserves and responsibility for protecting both the crash survivors and the inbound extraction team. Options, Olivia asked, her voice remaining steady despite the mounting pressure. Jack considered their Earth situation with the cold calculation of experience. We can maintain overwatch for approximately 15 more minutes before fuel becomes critically low. The extraction team will reach the crash site in about that time frame, but they'll need additional time to prepare the survivors for movement, especially with Williams's injuries. So we need to decide whether to maintain protection until they arrive or preserve enough fuel to ensure our own return. Olivia summarized the dilemma. Yes, Jack confirmed simply. It's your call, Lieutenant. Once again, Olivia faced the kind of impossible choice that defined combat command risk: their own survival to protect others, or ensure their safe return at the cost of leaving the survivors and extraction team more vulnerable. There was no perfect answer, no solution without significant risk. In this moment, she understood her father's reluctance about her career choice with perfect clarity. This was the burden he had carried, the weight he had tried to spare her. Yet now, facing it directly, she found a strange sense of calm in the center of the crisis. We'll maintain overwatch until the extraction team reaches the crash site, she decided. Once they're in position, we'll depart with minimum fuel reserves for return. Jack nodded, respecting her decision without comment. He had made similar choices throughout his career, accepting increased personal risk to protect others under his care. Adjusting our pattern to maximize fuel efficiency while maintaining surveillance coverage. Olivia continued, already implementing her plan, and will need an alternate return route that provides terrain masking with minimal power requirements. Already plotting it, Jack replied, his fingers moving across the tactical display. If we follow this valley system to the southeast, we can use the prevailing winds to reduce fuel consumption by approximately 8%. They settled into their new surveillance pattern, both acutely aware of the fuel gauge's steady decline but focused on their mission rather than their increasing personal risk. The professional discipline that defined them both came to the forefront, personal concerns subordinated to operational necessities. Movement at the crash site, Jack reported after several tense minutes. Survivors are preparing for evacuation, moving equipment to the eastern edge of the clearing. Any sign of the extraction team? Olivia asked, completing another circuit of their pattern. Not yet visual, but based on their last reported position, they should be approaching from the south within the next 5 minutes. The tactical display suddenly updated with new information. The smaller patrols we identified earlier are changing course, Jack noted. They're converging on the crash site more directly now. They must have received updated intelligence from the SAM site that engaged us. Time estimate until they reach the objective. First patrol could be there in 15 minutes, second in about 20, Jack calculated. It's going to be close. Olivia nodded grimly, adjusting their flight path to keep a closer watch on the approaching patrols. We need to give the extraction team every second we can. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness, each passing moment burning precious fuel while bringing both the extraction team and enemy patrols closer to the crash site. Jack maintained a running commentary on movements below, while Olivia focused on flying their increasingly fuel-critical aircraft with maximum efficiency. Visual confirmation on extraction team, Jack finally announced. Southern approach moving in tactical formation through the tree line. They're approximately 400 meters from the crash site. Enemy patrol positions, Olivia asked immediately. First patrol now approximately 800 meters from the objective, approaching from the northwest. They don't appear to have spotted the extraction team yet. The situation was balanced on a knife's edge. The extraction team would reach the survivors first, but not by much. Their window for evacuation would be measured in minutes, not hours. Fuel status critical, Jack reported. We need to begin our return within the next 5 minutes to maintain minimum safe reserves. Olivia completed another circuit, weighing their options. We need to delay that first patrol without exposing the extraction team's presence. Agreed, but how? We've expended our air-to-ground ordnance, and direct engagement would only accelerate enemy response. Olivia considered for a moment, then made another difficult decision. We'll make ourselves the target. A low-altitude pass near their position should draw their attention away from the crash site, at least temporarily. Jack understood the strategy immediately. Use ourselves as bait. It's risky, but it could buy the extraction team the time they need. Executing now, Olivia announced, banking the Super Hornet toward the approaching patrol. Prepare for high-speed, low-altitude pass. She brought the aircraft down to less than 200 feet above the terrain, accelerating to create maximum visual and acoustic impact. The Super Hornet roared over the patrol position, close enough for the enemy forces to clearly see the American aircraft, but too fast and low for effective small arms fire. The effect was immediate. The patrol scattered for cover, then regrouped with attention now firmly fixed on the aircraft rather than their approach to the crash site. Several fired ineffectively at the rapidly departing Super Hornet, further revealing their position to the extraction team. Diversion successful, Jack confirmed as they pulled away. Patrol has halted their advance and appears to be reporting our position. Extraction team continuing their approach to the crash site, now less than 200 meters away. Beginning our return route, Olivia decided, knowing they had pushed their fuel reserves to the absolute limit. We've given them the best chance we can. The Super Hornet banked onto its return heading, leaving behind the crash site and the drama unfolding below. They had accomplished their primary mission, and the extraction team had reached the survivors and now had a fighting chance to evacuate them before enemy forces arrived in strength. Extraction team has reached the crash site, Jack reported, monitoring the final transmissions. They're preparing the survivors for immediate evacuation. Olivia nodded, her focus now on navigating their return route with minimal fuel consumption. They would need every drop to reach friendly airspace. As they threaded through the valley system on their return journey, Jack broke the professional silence that had defined their interaction throughout the mission. You made the right calls back there, he said quietly. All of them. We're not home yet, Olivia replied, unwilling to accept praise before the mission was truly complete. No, but regardless of what happens now, you proved something today. To me and maybe to yourself. Olivia didn't respond immediately, her attention ostensibly on their flight path. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a new certainty. I understand now, Dad, why you tried to keep me away from this. The weight of these decisions. It's heavier than I imagined. Yes, Jack agreed simply. It is. But it's also clear now why you couldn't walk away completely, she continued. Why you became a consultant, kept one foot in this world. Some burdens are heavy, but they matter. They're worth carrying. Jack smiled slightly, though Olivia couldn't see it from the front seat. Your mother always said you understood me better than I understood myself. Mom was usually right. Olivia acknowledged, a hint of warmth entering her voice despite the tension of their situation. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a warning light on the instrument panel. Fuel level critical, Olivia announced, returning to professional mode. We're going to be cutting it very close. The prevailing winds in the next valley should help, Jack noted, studying their navigation display. and we can reduce power once we clear the mountain range and reach the foothills. For the next 20 minutes, they focused entirely on bringing their fuel-starved aircraft home, using every trick and technique to stretch their remaining fuel. Jack provided continuous calculations and suggestions, while Olivia implemented them with the precise control that had impressed him throughout the mission. As they approached friendly airspace, a final communication came through from Lieutenant Commander Hawkins. Shadow 1, this is Extraction Actual. Package secure, all souls recovered, returning to base. Your diversion made the difference. Well done. Jack and Olivia exchanged a brief glance through the cockpit mirror, a moment of shared satisfaction that transcended their professional roles. They had succeeded in their mission. All 4 survivors were safe, including Jack's old wingman. Base, this is Shadow 1, Olivia transmitted as they approached their home airfield. Requesting priority landing. Fuel state critical. Shadow 1 base, you are cleared for priority landing runway 27. Emergency crews standing by. The Naval Air Station appeared on the horizon, a welcome sight after their dangerous journey. Olivia began their approach, calculating glide slopes and touchdown points, with fuel conservation as the primary consideration. You've got this, Jack said quietly as they made their final approach, just like you've had it all along. Olivia completed the landing with textbook precision, touching down smoothly despite their critically low fuel state. As they taxied toward the waiting ground crew, the engine coughed once and then died. They had arrived with literally nothing left in the tanks. Emergency crews surrounded the aircraft as it rolled to a stop on the tarmac. The canopy opened and Olivia removed her helmet, exhaling deeply as the tension of the mission finally began to dissipate. Jack did the same, feeling the familiar mix of exhaustion and elation that followed successful combat missions. As they climbed down from the aircraft, they were met by Commander Wright and Chief Rodriguez, both wearing expressions of relief and admiration. Mission successful, Wright informed them. Extraction team reports all survivors recovered and inbound, including Major Williams. Medical teams are standing by. Rodriguez stepped forward, inspecting the aircraft with a professional eye before turning to its pilots. You brought her back empty, he noted, referring to the fuel tanks. Cutting it close as usual, Colonel. Some things never change, Chief, Jack replied with a tired smile. Captain Harris approached, his expression serious but approving. Lieutenant Reynolds, Colonel, outstanding work. The extraction team reports that without your reconnaissance and diversion, the mission would have failed. 4 Americans are coming home because of your actions today. Thank you, sir, Olivia acknowledged formally. Request permission to be present when the extraction team returns with the survivors. Granted, Harris confirmed. They're approximately 30 minutes out. Debriefing will follow after medical assessment of the survivors. As Harris and Wright moved away to coordinate the incoming evacuation, Olivia and Jack found themselves momentarily alone amidst the bustling activity of the airfield. You promised me something before we left, Olivia reminded her father. That if we made it back, you'd tell me everything. No more secrets. Jack nodded slowly. I did, and I will. He glanced toward the medical facilities where they would soon reunite with the rescued crew. After we see Tom and make sure he's okay. Fair enough, Olivia agreed, but I'm holding you to that promise. I'd expect nothing less, Jack replied, a new respect evident in his voice. You've earned the truth, Lieutenant, all of it. Together they walked toward the base operations building, father and daughter, 2 generations of military aviators who had bridged their differences through shared danger and mutual respect. The full reconciliation might still lie ahead, but the foundation had been laid in the skies above hostile territory, where each had seen the other's true character revealed under pressure. The day's mission was over, but their journey together was just beginning. 30 minutes later, the extraction helicopter thundered over the airfield, its rotors slicing through the afternoon air as it descended toward the medical pad. Medical teams rushed forward, gurneys prepared for the wounded as the aircraft settled onto the concrete. Jack and Olivia stood at a respectful distance, watching as the side door slid open and the extraction team began carefully transferring the survivors. Lieutenant Commander Hawkins emerged first, directing her team with efficient precision as they moved Major Williams on a specialized stretcher designed to immobilize potential spinal injuries. He doesn't look good, Olivia murmured, noting the medical equipment attached to the injured officer and the urgency with which the medical personnel received him. Tom's tough, Jack replied, though concern shadowed his features. He'll pull through. The remaining 3 survivors followed, all ambulatory, but showing signs of their ordeal, cuts, bruises, and the thousand-yard stare familiar to anyone who had faced death and survived. They were quickly escorted to waiting medical personnel for evaluation and treatment. Once the survivors had been moved inside, Hawkins approached Jack and Olivia, removing her tactical helmet to reveal sweat-matted hair and a face etched with fatigue but satisfaction. "That was some flying, Lieutenant," she acknowledged with professional respect. "Your diversion bought us exactly the time we needed. The first patrol was less than 300 meters away when we completed loading." "How's Major Williams?" Jack asked immediately. "Critical but stable," Hawkins reported. "The doctors are cautiously optimistic. His injuries are serious but survivable with proper treatment." She looked at Jack more carefully. "You know him?" "We flew together during Desert Storm," Jack explained. "He was my wingman." Understanding dawned in Hawkins' eyes. "That explains a few things. He recognized your voice on the radio, said something about history repeating itself in a better way this time." Jack nodded, emotion briefly visible before his professional demeanor returned. "When can we see him?" "The doctors will need a few hours to stabilize him and run diagnostics," Hawkins replied. "They'll notify you when he's cleared for visitors." She turned to Olivia. "Your flying saved those men, Lieutenant. I hope you know that." "It was a team effort," Olivia replied modestly. "Your extraction team did the dangerous part." Hawkins smiled slightly. "Let's just say we all earned our pay today." She checked her watch. "Captain Harris has scheduled debriefing in 30 minutes. I need to get my team sorted first." After Hawkins departed, Jack and Olivia found themselves with a rare quiet moment amidst the controlled chaos of the base. By unspoken agreement, they walked toward the far side of the airfield where their aircraft sat, now being thoroughly examined by Chief Rodriguez and his maintenance team. "You promised me the truth," Olivia reminded her father as they approached the Super Hornet, "about what happened on your last mission. The one that made you retire." Jack nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains barely visible on the horizon, the same mountains they had just returned from. "It happened 12 years ago," he began. "A mission very similar to the one we just completed. A downed aircraft hostiles closing in an extraction team needing cover." He paused, gathering thoughts he had kept buried for over a decade. "I was flying solo in an F-16 providing reconnaissance just like we did today. The weather was worse, heavy cloud cover, limited visibility. I identified a large enemy force approaching the crash site and made the decision to engage directly to buy time for the extraction." Olivia listened intently, hearing the tension in her father's voice as he relived the experience. "I successfully delayed the main force, but in the process I was hit by ground fire. Nothing critical, but enough to damage my fuel system. Like today, I found myself making calculations about whether I had enough fuel to return home." The parallels to their recent mission were unmistakable, and Olivia began to understand why her father had reacted so strongly to her career choice. "The extraction team needed just a few more minutes of cover," Jack continued. "I had to choose between maintaining overwatch until they completed the evacuation or departing immediately to ensure my own safe return." "What did you choose?" Olivia asked quietly, though she suspected the answer. "I stayed," Jack replied simply. "Used the last of my ammunition to keep the enemy at bay while the extraction team completed their work. By the time they were safely away, my fuel situation was beyond critical." He walked slowly around the Super Hornet, running his hand along its fuselage as he continued his story. "I nearly made it back to friendly airspace, but the engines flamed out about 20 miles short. I had to eject over mountainous terrain, broke my leg in the landing, and spent 2 days waiting for rescue." "But you saved the downed crew," Olivia noted. "Just like we did today." "Yes," Jack acknowledged. "All four survived. But during my recovery, I had time to think about the choices I'd made throughout my career, the risks I'd taken, the burden of command decisions. And I realized I couldn't keep doing it. Not because I was afraid, but because each mission like that takes something from you, a piece that doesn't grow back." "So you retired," Olivia concluded, "but you never really left it behind." "No," Jack admitted. "I couldn't walk away completely. Hence the consulting role, the continued connection to the world I'd spent my life in. And when I told you I wanted to become a combat pilot," Olivia began, "I saw you facing the same impossible choices, carrying the same burden," Jack finished. "I didn't want that for you. Not because you couldn't handle it, but because I knew exactly what it would cost you. Olivia absorbed this revelation, the final piece that made sense of her father's long opposition to her career choice. You should have told me this years ago. Maybe, Jack conceded. But would it have changed your decision? After a moment's reflection, Olivia shook her head. No, but it would have helped me understand. Understanding comes with experience, Jack replied. You couldn't truly understand what I was trying to protect you from until you faced it yourself, and today you did. And made the same choice you did, Olivia noted, to stay to protect others at increased risk to ourselves. Jack nodded, a hint of pride showing through his serious expression. Yes, because that's who we are, apparently. It's in the blood. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Captain Blake, who had been conspicuously absent since their return. His expression was difficult to read as he stopped before them and came to attention. Lieutenant Reynolds, Colonel, he acknowledged warmly. I wanted to personally congratulate you on the success of your mission. The recordings from your aircraft systems have been reviewed and your performance was, he hesitated, seemingly struggling with the admission, exceptional. Both of you. Thank you, Captain, Olivia replied professionally. Blake's rigid posture relaxed slightly. I was wrong about you, Lieutenant, about your capabilities and your readiness for combat operations. I apologize for my previous assessments. The admission clearly cost him something, but the sincerity seemed genuine. Olivia nodded acceptance of his apology without pressing the point. The debriefing will begin in 15 minutes, Blake informed them before departing with a respectful nod. That couldn't have been easy for him, Jack observed once Blake was out of earshot. No, Olivia agreed. But it was necessary, not for my ego, but for the unit. Doubts about capability can't linger in a combat team. Jack studied his daughter with newfound appreciation. When did you get so wise about leadership? I had a good example, Olivia replied with the ghost of a smile. Even if he was trying to keep me out of the cockpit. Before Jack could respond, Commander Wright approached with an update. Major Williams is stabilized and asking to see you both before the debriefing. The doctors have allowed a brief visit. They followed Wright to the medical facility where they found Thomas Williams connected to various monitoring equipment, but conscious and alert. His face brightened visibly when he saw Jack. Jack Reynolds, he said, his voice weak but clear. Still pulling my ass out of the fire after all these years. Old habits, Jack replied with genuine warmth, moving to his friend's bedside. How are you feeling, Tom? Like I got hit by a truck, then thrown off a mountain for good measure. Williams managed a pained smile. But I'll live thanks to you. His gaze shifted to Olivia. And to you, Lieutenant, that was some flying today. Thank you, sir, Olivia replied. I'm glad we could help bring you home. Williams looked between father and daughter. Reynolds and Reynolds, now there's a dangerous combination. He reached out with a bandaged hand, which Jack clasped carefully. It was like Desert Storm all over again, Jack. But this time everything went right. Jack nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in his old friend's words. This mission had echoed their shared past, but with a different outcome, a form of redemption for the choices that had haunted Jack for decades. The doctors say I need rest, Williams continued, but I wanted to thank you both personally. What you did up there today, it was beyond the call of duty. Just doing our job, Major, Olivia responded professionally. Williams smiled weakly. You sound just like your father, Lieutenant. Take that as the highest compliment I can give. A nurse appeared to indicate that their visit needed to conclude. Jack squeezed his old friend's hand one last time. Get some rest, Tom. We'll talk more when you're stronger. As they left the medical facility and headed toward the debriefing, Jack and Olivia walked side by side, a new understanding between them. The day's events had transformed their relationship in ways that would take time to fully process, but the foundation had been laid. He was right, you know, Jack said quietly. You do sound like me sometimes. Poor kid. Olivia laughed softly, the tension of the day finally beginning to dissipate. There are worse things to sound like. After the debriefing, Jack began somewhat hesitantly. I thought maybe we could call your mother together. She'd like to hear from both of us, I think. I'd like that, Olivia agreed. She's been caught in the middle of our standoff for too long. They reached the briefing room door, pausing before entering. Jack turned to his daughter, his expression serious but warm. Whatever happens next in your career and after today, I suspect you'll have some interesting opportunities. I want you to know I'm proud of you, Olivia. Not just as a pilot, but as the person you've become. That means a lot, Olivia replied simply. More than you know. I think I'm beginning to understand, Jack said with a slight smile. Then with a return to military formality that somehow conveyed more respect than any emotional display could have after you, Lieutenant. Olivia nodded and entered the briefing room, her father following close behind. The mission was over. The debriefing would conclude their official duties. But the journey they had begun together, not just as father and daughter, but as two aviators who had faced the ultimate test and emerged stronger, was just beginning. In the mountain skies, they had found not just a path to bring four Americans home, but a way back to each other. And that perhaps was the most important mission accomplishment of all. The debriefing proceeded with military precision, each moment of the mission analyzed and documented for future operations. Captain Harris concluded by announcing a formal commendation for both Reynolds, with Olivia receiving consideration for the Distinguished Flying Cross, a recognition that would cement her status among the base's elite pilots. Later that evening, in the privacy of Commander Wright's office, Jack and Olivia placed a video call to Margaret Reynolds. Her face brightened when she saw them together, a sight she hadn't witnessed in years. "You two look exhausted," she observed with maternal concern, "but you're smiling together." "We had quite a day," Jack replied, his hand resting briefly on his daughter's shoulder. "Mom, I flew with Dad today," Olivia said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "A real mission." Margaret's eyes widened. "Jack Reynolds back in a cockpit. Now there's a story I need to hear." As they recounted their adventure sanitized of classified details, Margaret watched them with knowing eyes. The subtle glances between father and daughter, the professional respect now evident in Jack's voice when he spoke of Olivia's flying the easy way. They finished each other's sentences. When describing the mission, all signs of a barrier broken, a relationship renewed. When the call ended, Olivia turned to her father. "You could stay a few more days. There's a systems evaluation on the new terrain following radar next week." Jack smiled. "I'd like that. Maybe we could take a training flight together, without the missiles this time." "I'd like that too, Dad," Olivia replied, and for the first time in years, the words held no tension, no unspoken conflict, just the simple truth of a daughter and father who had finally found common ground 30,000 feet above hostile territory.